Okay.
For the interview.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Director of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. Beside him is Reverend Anthony Chung, Minister, Ridgemount United Church. He'll be giving our invocation. Then there is Dr. Michelle Harris. She's from the Pan American Health Organization. And we would like to thank them now because they have always supported mental health, and they're actually sponsoring this conference for us. So we want to thank PAHO WHO in a very special way today. Beside Dr. Harris is Mr. Michael Bent, the RD for Southern Regional Health Authority. And beside him is Mr. Wayne Chen, who is the board chair of the Southern Regional Health Authority. Okay, so another matter of housekeeping. Apparently there is another workshop going on, National Family Planning Board.
Yes. Upstairs.
And therefore we want to make sure that
You are in the right
you're in the right place. You would like to make sure you're in the right place.
Yes. If you are to go there.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so just for you to know. Okay, all right, good. All right, great. Okay. We also want to acknowledge our friends from UNICEF. They're going to be doing our presentation later. And they have always, again, been very supportive of mental health and adolescence and children affairs. We also have some psychiatrists in the room. And I need to mention Dr. Pauline Milburn, because she is my mentor. She was a pioneer for child guidance clinics. And thankfully, she's alive and well, and she's here today. Okay. I want to welcome everybody else, especially our young people. It's so wonderful to see so many of our young people here today. And we really hope that from today you will be ambassadors for us in terms of mental health at home, mental health in the schools, mental health in the communities. And of course, the rest of us adults, teachers, health personnel, anybody working with the youth, we welcome you and hope that you have a wonderful day today. I'll now invite Reverend Anthony Chung to give the invocation.
cherish. Give us vision, lest we perish. Knowledge send us, heavenly Father, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever. Jamaica, land we love. Jamaica, 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 land we love. Stand at ease, stand at ease, everyone. You may be seated.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Williams. Okay, welcome to everyone. Dr. Goldberg will give an official welcome, but let me give mine a bit. I'm Dr. Judith Ligo, Director of Child and Adolescent Mental Health in the Ministry of Health. Today is a wonderful day. It's a wonderful day to be here, and it's a wonderful day to be celebrating mental health and young people, and also to be celebrating our changing world. Just by way of housekeeping, anybody who wishes the restrooms, they're over to my left. There we see those wooden panels are. There's depression screening, which is taking place at the Southern Regional Health Authority banner. There's also a restroom, which is upstairs. To our young people, well, anybody, but especially to our young people, you can take out your pens. I'm going to give you a WhatsApp number. And if you have any queries at all, you can send it to that WhatsApp number, and we'll try to address it. Okay, so the WhatsApp number is, the usual 876, then 774 7654. I'm going to repeat it. Yeah, 876, usual, 774 7654. Did everybody get that? Okay. Another matter of housekeeping. Each person should have received 2 tickets. I'm going to look for mine. 1 ticket is for break and 1 ticket is for lunch. Please make sure that each person has 2 tickets.
Good morning, everyone. As we begin this time, I want to invite us to a moment of centering. If we could just, where you are, imagine you are the only person in the room. And if it's not too risky for you, just to close your eyes for a moment. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. A time for everything. The nature of human life is that it's filled with activities. There's always something going on, somewhere to go, something to do. And yet there is also a time to be still and to acknowledge the one who causes all things to be. say a brief prayer, and then I'll share just a few thoughts. Let us pray. In the stillness of this moment, O God, we gather to reflect on life in the world and our health. As we meet, we invoke your presence in this place. We acknowledge that you are God. You are sovereign. You're in charge. Cause us then, O Lord, to be conscious and aware of your presence. In Christ's name, amen. So, just a few thoughts. A time for everything under the sun. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to embrace, a time to embrace from embracing. A time to gather stones, a time to scatter stones. Those are words from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Perhaps you're familiar with them. And what they do is they picture for us this idea, present for us this idea that there is diversity, there is order, there is design to life. And that if we engage in one activity exclusively, we run the risk of being off balance. If we spend all our time eating, then that's probably not good. But if we never eat at all, neither is that good. So there's a time for everything. But then later on in the writings, the wise man says, and yet still, time is not everything. That God has placed in the human heart eternity, the need for something more than time. That if we were to gather everything we could and engage in every activity that was possible during our lifetime, we'd still find that there is something missing. So he says, God has placed within us eternity, the desire for something beyond the visible, the tangible, beyond time. And God has done that so that human beings might seek after God. In this time, as we meet and as we reflect on the changing nature of the world and how such changes can cause all different kinds of stress. When I was growing up, all we did was ramp and play and have a good time. You know, you talk to 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds and they say, oh, I am under stress. They are stressed by all different kinds of things. So in this ever-changing world, can we make time for balance? Make time for rest, for relaxation, but also time for work. Robert Fugglum was a Quaker religious person. And he wrote a book, Everything I Need to Live, I Learned in Kindergarten. And in it he says, you know, some of the most fundamental truths about life find their root in infancy. Be careful when you go out on the road. Look out for each other. Put back things where you find them. Those are some of the things he said he learned. That wisdom was not in graduate school. It was on the play field, in the sandbox. And the argument he makes is about finding balance in life and engaging in a diverse array of activities. A time for everything. I wish you well as you meet, and I offer you God's guidance and God's blessing. Let us pray. Lord, you are the source and the author of time. Our times are in your hand, and so we thank you for this time. Thank you for the work of the Ministry of Health and the Mental Health Unit and Department. We thank you, Lord, for all those who engage in helping us to be whole. And as we meet in this conference this day, we pray that your presence would be with us, that you'd guide our thoughts, grant courage and strength and wisdom to all who will participate. And may this be a rich and rewarding time to the glory and honor of your name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Chung, for that invocation. We have been joined by Dr. Vitilius Holder, the Regional Technical Director for Southern Region. Welcome, Dr. Holder. Let me say that when we were planning this conference, we were told straight out that Kingston is not Jamaica. Kingston is not Jamaica. And we want to acknowledge that. We had our church service in Hanover, right? And I knew that if it wasn't going to be in Kingston, it would be in the southern region, because we know the southern region is kind of cutting edge. So, okay. I also need to say that our Honorable Minister, Dr. Christopher Tufton, would have loved to have been here. I don't know how many of you have heard him on the radio, have seen the video clips of him, but he really has been championing mental health. And he would have loved to have been here, but there's a Nurses Association of Jamaica conference, I think it's at the other side of the island, and he had to be there, okay? So I'd like to apologize for him, but we want to acknowledge the work that he's doing and the fact that he's really championing the cause. I've never heard a minister go to Bellevue and do a video at Bellevue. So, you know, there's a lot of firsts for Dr. Tufton, and we really would like to give him credit. Okay, so now we'll have Dr. Kevin Goldburn, who will give welcome and opening remarks, followed by Dr. Holder, then to bring greetings, Dr. Michael Bent, and Dr. Michelle Harris. Okay, in that order. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Thank you, Dr. Leiber, for your kind words of introduction. It is my pleasure to welcome members of the head table, the advisor on non-communicable diseases and mental disorders in PAHO WHO office in Kingston, Jamaica, Dr. Michelle Harris, the regional director for the Southern Regional Health Authority, Mr. Michael Bent, the regional technical director of this. Testing.
Sorry, another matter of housekeeping. Apparently the person who is driving vehicle number 0920HA, can you move it right now because you're blocking the entrance? 0920HA, thank you.
So I'd also like to welcome the Regional Technical Director of the Southern Regional Health Authority, Dr. Holder. I'd like to welcome the Chairman of the Southern Regional Health Authority Board and our guest speaker for today, Mr. Wayne Chen. Welcome to the members of the audience from different ministries, departments, agencies, and from various vocations. Welcome to members from various schools. We see you as special attendees. Considering today, I think, is your midterm break, and you made an effort to be here. We are so happy to have you here. Please feel welcome. Welcome to the members from the media fraternity, and in particular, Power 106 will provide an outside broadcasting of today's event. We also want to welcome persons watching us via live stream provided by Jamaica Information Service, and is available by going to the Ministry of Health Instagram and Facebook page. Welcome to Cool Mandeville. I'm partially from Manchester, so I know about the coolness of Mandeville. And I assume that here, you don't use air conditioning here in Mandeville, do you? As you all know, the theme for World Mental Health Day is young people and mental health in a changing world. But what are some of the challenges to the mental well-being of young people today? Some of them are ongoing challenges that we have been faced over generations. Adolescence and early years of adulthood are periods of life when many changes occur, from establishing one's identity to changing schools, forming and establishing close relationships, independent living, starting university, or starting a new job. Now, with the advent of technology, the world has become a global village, so that young people are exposed, whether directly or indirectly, to human rights violations, conflicts, wars, violence in and outside of their homes, schools, and places of work. They are also spending more time on the internet and social media, experiencing cyber crimes, cyberbullying, and playing violent video games while putting themselves at risk for human trafficking. At the same time, the social cohesion of our communities is rapidly disappearing, with some negative consequences. The popular saying and reality that it takes a village to raise a child is rapidly disappearing. In recent times, when I was a boy, you would hear about drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes or smoking weed. But nowadays, kids are able to use legal and readily available household items to make substances to abuse, such as lean. Then there's the issue of suicidal thoughts and suicidal attempts, which were significant findings among youngsters in school surveys done last year in Jamaica. This, in my mind, is particularly indicative of poor coping skills, lack of adequate social support, and the changing world we are living in, which may predispose youngsters to become emotionally disturbed and consider suicide. Now, the Ministry of Health, in recognition that 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illnesses begin by the age of 14 years, have been collaborating with various ministries, departments, and agencies to put in place measures to prevent mental illness or to intervene early when mental illness is detected. One initiative to be undertaken is developing mental health literacy as a part of the school curriculum to increase awareness and knowledge of mental health issues among high school students and their teachers. This will help youngsters to be more caring, less judgmental, and having the ability to recognize signs and symptoms of mental illness and to seek help. Mental health literacy helps youngsters gain knowledge of the risk and protective factors of mental illness, the causative factors of mental illness, what self-help measures they can take if they are feeling emotionally disturbed, and where to seek professional help. Mental health literacy will also facilitate youngsters developing a positive attitude towards those persons living with mental illness and a positive attitude towards seeking professional help. Now, prevention of mental illness begins with reducing the modifiable risk factors, such as stress, child abuse, strained interpersonal relationships, domestic and community violence. So parents, teachers, and wider society have an important role to play in this and in helping to build the life skills of children, adolescents, and young adults to help them cope with everyday challenges at home, in the community, and at school. The Ministry of Health provides service to our young people by a cadre of hard-working mental health practitioners who manage mental health disorders in our child and adolescent mental health clinics and in our over 150 adult clinics island-wide. I think some of them are here, so we can ask them to stand so we can acknowledge them, please, from the different regions. Mental health workers, could you please stand? Please stand and be acknowledged. Okay, thank you. So investment in prevention and early detection and effective management of the young by government and civil society is essential and crucial to the bright future of Jamaica, land we love. So today's conference will hopefully increase our collective and individual mental health literacy level, and thus decrease the stigma and discrimination towards persons living with mental illness. So sit back, but instead of just relaxing, I want you to LLP. What is LLP? Listen, learn, and participate, and make a positive difference when you return from whence you came. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to our special guest, Dr. Goulburn, Dr. Harris, Mr. Bent, Mr. Chen, Dr. Leiber, our special guest in the audience. I'm seeing familiar faces. And as was said, Kingston is not Jamaica, and we're glad all of you are here today. And also to our invited guests, our students, our different agencies who are part of our partnership in terms of addressing mental health illnesses. Dr. Goulburn has given us a wide introduction in terms of what is happening, and we can then recognize that it is important that in terms of addressing mental health in young people, we are in fact being very strategic. Being very strategic in the sense that a healthy young population, if they are well, will make very productive persons in the workforce, and so therefore in terms of the economy. So we have better economy, we have better workforce, we have a better society. So therefore it is important and very strategic that we target persons going into adulthood, that we have the best in terms of producing for our country. And as was mentioned, it is important that even though we are focusing on the young people, that it doesn't just start at the adolescent and the young people. And so therefore, the work is there for all of us, those who deal with maternal and child health, because if in case you have a mother who is pregnant, and in terms of the conditions under which the baby would develop, if there are stress factors within that period of development, it can further lead to problems. And if in case these mothers and families who have these children are having issues in terms of the development and growth of these children, if the environment in the homes in their early development is not at the max either, that can impact on them going into adolescenthood. So in terms of adolescent health, it's very strategic, but everybody needs to be on board. So therefore, we need to be there to help our parents and caregivers to ensure that our children are growing up and developing mental resilience to be able to face the world, as well as when we have teachers and then anybody interfacing with our children. And so therefore, each of us have a role. We have our young people who are in school, and as was mentioned, if they don't have very strong support and in terms of mental health going into universities, they can be easily swayed. And so therefore, it is up to all of us, it is everybody's business that we understand what mental health is and that we ourselves who are providing the service are also mentally well. So I hope today is going to be a very productive day as we look at new areas that were not, those of us who went to school a long time, new areas that are coming out in terms of mental issues. A lot of us who are parents don't even understand when our kids are on the phones at night. When they're there in their beds, and they're losing their sleeps, they're stressed. So therefore, let us be aware, and as we go through today, that whatever that we take and move forward and ensure that we have a healthy nation. Thank you.
Members of the head table, Chairman Dr. Leiber, members of the visiting regional health authorities, members of the Ministry of Health, the schools, education, and all stakeholders. It is indeed a pleasure to have you this morning or today in the Southern Regional Health Authority. And so I greet you well, and I welcome you to the Southern Regional Health Authority. As Dr. Leiber in her statement stated that Southern region is kind of a cutting edge, but I'm going to qualify that. take out the kind of and say cutting edge. Eh? So we are happy because we believe that we should at all times be cutting edge in whatever service we do. So, ladies and gentlemen, I need to commend the mental health team on this year's theme this year, young people and mental health in a changing world. Dr. Goldburn referred to the days where, when we were just a recent time when we were young boys, you know? See, we were young boys running up and down at Monroe. We didn't have some of these challenges. But, right, Mr. Goldburn, Dr. Goldburn, well, it's important that we address the needs of our young people in this changing world. The Southern Regional Health Authority, we are committed to mental health as a program in our region. And you can just see, just by the mere presence of, for having this function, we'll say they have the top 3 persons from the region. We have a chairman led by the chairman, Mr. Wayne Chen, Dr. Holder, the technical director, and myself, the regional director. So it shows our commitment. It's not just by token, but by total commitment. Certainly, at the board level, one of the programs that are questioned by the board is the progress and work of the mental health. Several times I can, Chairman Lattes, he call me and say, RD, I see somebody on the street, mental health team has to be cracking. And so in the southern region here, we have a very robust team of mental health practitioners who most time I think go beyond the call of duty to ensure that our persons are healthy and the calls are responded to and that the program gets its full share of attention. We recognize in the southern region that, yes, in order to improve on the outputs, we'll have to do some things. Things like improvement in our infrastructure as it relates to some of the places that the team have to operate from. And we have started that, possibly not to the extent that we would have, at the speed that we would have wanted to, but we are committed to continuously improve on the infrastructure so that a team can be seen not as the poor cousin, or in the poor cousin because that has been moved, certainly southern region, and that the program will have its fullest output. Just recently, when I checked with my finance persons, and we look at the spend on mental health, we are seeing that we are going in the right direction, right? And it is our commitment that we'll continuously improve. We are challenged, though, in terms of psychiatrists. I know Dr. Garvey and her team, sometimes I call her and say, Dr. Garvey, just come and sit down because I know you have to be out there, so, you know. But we are committed to the team. So I just want again to thank you for choosing Southern Regional Health Authority, and in particular Mandeville, for this, your day of celebration, and to pledge our continuous commitment to the improvement of the mental health program for Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wayne Chen, Chairman of the Southern Regional Health Authority, Dr. Kevin Goldburn, Acting Director of Mental Health Services in the Ministry of Health, Mr. Michael Bent, Regional Director, Dr. Vitilius Holder, Regional Technical Director, Reverend Anthony Chung, Dr. Leiber, Chairman, members of the Southern Regional Health Authority in the audience, other invited guests, and particularly our youth. It indeed gives me great pleasure to bring greetings to you this morning on behalf of Dr. Bernadette Theodore Gandhi, the representative of the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization in Jamaica. Indeed, I bring her apologies that she's unable to be here because of prior commitments, but as the advisor with the portfolio of non-communicable diseases and mental health, she saw it fit that I should represent her here today. As we celebrate World Mental Health Day under the theme of young people and mental health in the changing world, it is important for us to remember that our health, and most certainly our mental health, is affected by the conditions in which we are born, grow, live, work, and age, and those we refer to as the social determinants of health. The Pan American Health Organization recognizes that many persons live, and many young persons live in situations that cause them to experience varying levels of stress and anxiety. These range from difficulties in the family, when there are changes in living arrangements, violence in their communities and neighborhoods that cause them to be apprehensive and constantly in fear for their own safety and for the safety and well-being of members of their family. Also, we recognize that post-disaster stress is an area relatively new that also affects our young people. There are challenges at school, and there are instances where they're not coping with the work, not coping well with the work, or they are unable to fit in with their peers. This often results in bullying, which may take a number of various forms. The persons before alluded to when we were young. But now we know that a lot has changed, and we are recognizing this time the changing world in which our youth are being developed. So yes, the bullying takes a variety of forms, and this can lead to poor life choices, such as becoming involved in substance use and other practices, all in an effort to fit in or to escape the pressures. As mentioned earlier, half of all mental illnesses begin by age 14, and suicide or suicidal ideation and anxiety are the two leading causes of illness and disability among young people. We note that the Global School Health Survey that was conducted in 2017 reported that 1 out of every 4 young person between the ages of 13 and 17 had seriously considered suicide in the 12 months prior to the survey. It is therefore important to identify the symptoms of emotional disorders such as irritability, frustration, anger. There's so many ways in which our young people display anger, and we need to be sensitive to identify it. There is also unexpected change in mood in our children and young people, which, if left undiagnosed and unaddressed, can lead to serious consequences. We are convinced that young people should be given the skills to cope in their world and to build mental resilience. Prevention begins with a better understanding of the situation and challenges, and then an investment in comprehensive, integrated, and evidence-based programs to address the identified needs. These programs need to include parents, teachers, and the wider community and social organizations which have an effect or an impact on the lives of the youth. And, of course, the young persons themselves need to be involved. I therefore commend the Ministry of Health and the Southern Regional Health Authority for organizing this conference today, and particularly for the wide cross-section of youth that are represented here. PAHO stands ready, as we always have been, to support the Ministry of Health in the area of addressing the mental health needs of the population. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Dr. Leachman from the Ministry of Youth could not be here. You know, we like to invite our partners to join us, but we'll be now asking Councillor Jones Oliphant to bring greetings from the MP for the area, Mr. Peter Bunting. Mr. Jones Oliphant, please come.
Madam Chair, members of the head table, members of the audience, good morning. I want to say a special welcome to this conference and also congratulations to you. I need to apologize on my lateness. I got the time wrong. And in addition to that, I need to apologize on behalf of the MP, Peter Bunting, who has sent his greetings, his well wishes for this conference, but he is unavoidably absent. So because I am the counselor for this area, this is my area, I have to welcome you. But it would be type of difficult for me to shake all of your hands to give you a warm welcome. So I'm going to borrow your left hand. Put up your left hand, please. And the right hand represent my own. So you're going to put them together and you're going to shake them. Okay, I guess you have had a warm welcome from me. I want to say congratulations to the Southern Health Authority and also to the Ministry of Health and PAHO. You see, people will wonder about Manchester. But let me tell you something about Manchester. We are the leaders in this country. And let me tell you something. When it comes on to the Southern Regional Health Authority, they are the leaders. Because I have had opportunity of working with the Southern Health Authority, and I can tell you, we have the most innovative and hard-working, dedicated set of people in that region. I don't know about any other region, but I know about it. And to prove it to you, Mr. Bent, there was once when we had the 3 M's, the 3 Michaels, and they shook health in this parish. We also have a lady, Mrs. Mullings, Nurse Mullings, somebody that needs to be commended. Because when I report to her about the people on the street and I suspect they are mental, and I am afraid of them, you know, I stay far from them. And when I call her and her team, Sachin, I don't know, you have to go and put up our pay scale. When I call her and I tell her about any situation with anybody on the street, she and her team, I don't know how she do it, but she just go and get them and they are so calm. You see, Manchester, because of the coolness, it attracts the mental people. Yes, it's true. It's cool, and we are not that hostile to them. It is a parish where we care for them, right? And because of that, you find that they keep coming. And not only the mental, but also the homeless. We have a population of homelessness of just about 60 persons. And since this week, Wednesday was the International Day of the Homeless, it was celebrated, and we opened a facility so that we can care for these people. And in addition to that, I just want to let you know that we like when people feed the people, but we don't like when you feed them in the park. We feel that we have a facility where you can take them, you can invite them to be, where they can have a bath, they can be properly groomed, and they can have their meals. That's Kangle in the Dark and Caledonia Road. And opposite Kangle in the Dark, on the other side, we have the Adventist Church that provide feeding facilities and also bathroom facilities. So we ask you to encourage them to go to these facilities so that they can sit down, they can have their meal decently and in order, just like how when we eat, that's how we want to treat them and let them feel. But we don't like when they are being fed in the park, because what they do is they do things in the park that we're not pleased of, okay? So let us lift the standard. And as you go through this conference, I want to say congratulations, and also the awareness that you have given us how to treat mental illness. As it says, health is wealth. And unfortunately, sometimes we use our health to gain wealth. And then we have to turn around and use all the wealth that we have gained, trying to gain back health, of which we cannot. So let us preserve our health and do what we can in the best. Thank you. I've gone over time.
Thank you, Councillor. And I will now invite Ms. Nicola Williams, mental health nurse practitioner for Mandeville, in Mandeville, to introduce our illustrious guest speaker.
Good morning, everyone. As I am given the task to introduce our guest speaker for today, no other than Wayne Christopher Chen. Wayne Christopher Chen was born in Port Antonio, Jamaica. He's a third of Vincent and Hyacinth Chen's 9 children. He graduated from the University of the West Indies with an LLB with honors in 1981. The following year, he started his first business, a small supermarket in central Jamaica. Over the next 25 years, he and his family grew their business, Superplus Food Stores, into an island-wide chain, which at its peak in the mid-2000s was the country's largest retailer. He is the recipient of several awards for business and philanthropy, including the Jamaica Observer's 1998 Business Leader of the Year and Irving Hall, University of the West Indies 2006 Distinguished Torchbearer Award. Currently, he is a president of the Caribbean Employers Confederation, chairman of Jamaica's Southern Regional Health Authority and CVM Television. He is a director of AIC in Barbados, the majority shareholder of National Commercial Bank, Jamaica's largest. He was a director of that bank and chaired its subsidiaries, NCB Insurance Company and NCB Cayman, for 15 years. He has served as president of the Jamaica Employers Federation, commissioner of CARICOM HRD Commission, and chairman of Jamaica's Urban Development Corporation, National Land Agency, and National Gallery. From the late 1980s, into the 1990s, he worked closely with reggae legend Toots Hibbert, acting as business advisor and executive producer of Grammy-nominated album. Christopher Wayne Chen is also co-author of Reggae Roots. Please have him welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I ask for forgiveness from the beginning because I'm not in the best of health this morning, but this occasion was so important, Dr. Leiber, I could not miss it because it is one of my, I wouldn't say, one of my pet areas for many, many years. I want to say all protocols observed, save one. I was scared they weren't going to recognize my friend Jones Oliphant, the councillor from Mandeville. And it's important I recognize Councillor Oliphant because the Manchester Municipal Corporation, which sounds like a tongue twister, has been a very, very good partner to the Southern Regional Health Authority in terms of the delivery of public health. And it's important because partnership, we talk about partnership in the country. Partnerships are important. It's important too, and it's not by coincidence, I'm seeing Reverend Chung here. And it's not coincidence that he's here because the Ridgemont Church has been a strong and reliable provider of counseling services over the many years in Mandeville. I've sent many, many people there because the capacity to respond has not been the greatest in the public system. And Ridgemont United has been very, very good at providing these services. So I want to recognize both gentlemen. I can't throw my shop voice this morning. But we have an overused word. Oh, I want to, as I glance across, I see some of my old friends, many of your guidance counselors. I want to recognize you because many of you have really been have been in the front line in terms of providing that service for our young people. And I want to recognize you especially. And thank you for being here this morning. But Reverend, my only misgiving is that sometimes I feel that we're only preaching to the converted, that there are very, very many people out there who need the preaching, but they are not in this room. So taking up the theme from Dr. Goldburn, I wrote it down, LLP, listen, learn, and participate. I thought he was going to say listen, learn, and preach, but I don't know how that one slipped past. So we have to listen, learn, and preach today. We have to go out and leave this room to be missionaries for the improved mental health, not only of our young people, but of all our people. There was a doctor who said to me many years ago, and I'm straying from the speech for a simple reason. Dr. Goldburn gave my speech already, so I have to give a separate speech here now. But it's a good thing, I didn't go to Monroe, but I can think on my feet. That we have to be missionaries. A doctor had said to me many years ago that Jamaica's biggest crisis, and I hate to use the word crisis because it tends to be overused, that Jamaica's biggest crisis is untreated mental illness. And it has become a growing concern, and I'll get into that as I go through some of the numbers, not too many numbers today. It has become a growing concern because we are slow in responding even as the crisis grows. But thankfully things are picking up, as evidenced by this conference here in Mandeville today. You're in the right place, organizers. Councillor, we are on the cutting edge, not just Southern Region. The town of Mandeville is on the cutting edge. So I jumped to the World Health Organization definition. And they say mental disorders comprise a broad range of problems with different symptoms. However, they are generally characterized by some combination of abnormal thoughts, emotions, behavior, and relationships with others. Examples are schizophrenia, depression, intellectual disabilities, and disorders due to drug abuse. The good news is that most of these disorders can be successfully treated. It is reported that 108,000 Jamaicans, or 4% of the population, were treated by mental health professionals across the island in 2015. The most prevalent disorders were schizophrenia and depression. Depression in Jamaica aligns with global trends where 25% of females and 15% of males are suffering. You hear the number? It's estimated that 25% of females and 15% of males are suffering from depression. So if you look beside you and 3 people are beside you, odds are that one of the 3 or one of the 4 are suffering from depression. Sometimes I feel that I don't have to look beside me, I just have to look in the mirror. So none of us are immune. We must never say that we're immune, you know. I might have a smile on my face, but trust me, sometimes when the stress reaches, I have to check myself and say, maybe I should give Dr. So-and-so a call. In fact, I just came across, and I've been reading a lot on this subject, and I continue to read a lot on this subject, that in the UK, I saw a report just a couple of days ago, that the mental health services in England have seen a 25% rise in the last five years alone. And their concern is that they don't have the capacity to cope with the rise. On the individual level, mental health illness contributes to our general feeling of unhappiness. When you look around and you see some people looking so glum, when I go to work in the morning and I see the workers coming in or I see the customers coming in and their face looking like this, I do my best to lift. But in many instances, it is far deeper than just the momentary feeling of unhappiness. But the fact is that mental illness has an outcome, or a truncated, I was trying to think of a smaller word. We are disappointed in our own personal development because we are not able to meet the daily challenges, whether of school or of work once we leave school. This underperformance only exacerbates more unhappiness and more illness. Mental illness in Jamaica manifests itself in high levels of violent and antisocial behavior. It puts stress on families and communities, which in turn creates an environment for more mental stress and more mental illness. But the fact is that even at the best of times, Jamaica is a very stressful place to live. We have to acknowledge that. We live in a stressful country, we live in a stressful environment. We are a struggling developing country where many of us live in poverty or teeter on the brink of poverty. There is still a big gap in Jamaica between the haves and the have-nots, which puts additional stress on us. Attaining the basic necessities of life, the school fee, the lunch money, the taxi fare, is a daily struggle for large numbers of Jamaicans. When I look, and I've served on many school boards in this parish and elsewhere, and when we look at the absenteeism figures, when it comes to Thursday and Friday and how many kids are not at school on a Friday, it is a testament to the struggles that families have to go through just to meet the basic necessities. And you know, of course, I won't get into the nitty-gritty that when you miss a day of school, it's not that you have missed 25% of the learning or 20% of the learning. You have disrupted your education, and the outcome that you get later on is severely handicapped by the absenteeism and puts more stress and puts you more at risk of mental illness. We have a competitive school structure that focuses primarily on 2 examinations, the GSAT and now the PEP. And then after you think you get a little break after 6th grade, by the time you get into 5th form translates what, 11th grade? By the time you get to 11th grade, now you have the CSEC. In another life, I'll tell you it's CSEC and not CXC, but it's CSEC. And now the minimum standard is the 5 subjects, including math and English A, that many of us are struggling to attain. I note another recent development in one of the most advanced educational systems in the world, where Singapore has now said they are going to abolish class rankings, they are going to de-emphasize test scores, and they are going to focus on the individual getting a rounded education at their pace. Now, this is one of the most competitive countries in the world, and they have acknowledged that the fallout and the toll on their young people in terms of their mental health is not worth the competition for exam grades. And we see it right here in Jamaica. In fact, the UK has come to the same realization, and their Education Commission is working to change the overemphasis on examination scores. It's not to say that examination scores are not important. They are only one way of determining your progress through the system. Education is not a race. It is a process. And we have to change that philosophy. And I touch on that one because that is one of the major causes of stress on young people and the parents. So, starting with that, we're talking about investing in our young people. Let us invest in the educational reform. That yes, we have to have standards. Yes, we have to have benchmarks. But it cannot be the be-all and end-all. Ensuring that our young people get a rounded education is critical. I want to go back to what my young Monroonians have touched on earlier. That it didn't touch us in our time. The fact is that we live in great times now, you know. Mental illness has always been around for young people, even in our time. And I'm a little older than them, even in our time. It's just that we never recognized it as such back in the 60s and 70s when we were in high school. They say 80s, but I would say 70s. When in the 70s, if you were unruly or unsettled in class, nobody would say you had ADHD or some sort of attention deficit issue. They would just say you're rude or you're unteachable or so on. The fact is that we had no issue then in discarding people who did not fit in the mold of what we thought a good student looked like. But it was fine then because we had a competitive system that needed a few excellent and didn't care too much about the bottom rung of the class. And the bottom rung oftentimes was not that the student was not capable. It was that the student had some issue that was never addressed. And in hindsight, I feel remorseful about it, that if we had only known then what we know now, we would have taken a different approach. Even as peers, because students, we have a responsibility to our fellow students when we see them exhibiting behavior that is out of sync with what is positive for that child, positive for your friend, positive for your classmate. You have a responsibility not to ridicule, not to ostracize, but to help them to get the help that they need. But I tell you, the evidence of it is that some of the same students that I knew from primary school, prep school, and high school days, who we thought were hopeless, have gone on to have excellent outcomes. Sadly, many of them not in Jamaica, but going into a different system overseas where they're more sensitive to some of these issues, and they got the requisite support and help. So we only can reflect now on how many students have passed through the system, not having had the support and not having the outcomes that their potential would have suggested. I want to stick on this point a little longer. It's not that the policy was not there, you know, because the Ministry of Education policy for many, many years has recognized the need for special education. MICO has a good special education unit. UWI, many years ago, it seemed like just yesterday, put in a degree program for special educators. Much of what they were looking for were these issues of attention deficit and so on, reading disabilities and so on. But the fact is that we have not followed through sufficiently to ensure that the resources, which are supposed to by the Education Act, be put aside for counseling and for help, have not yet been fully implemented. And this is years and years and years and years after the challenge was recognized, the policy was articulated and implemented, but the final step of ensuring that every school has put aside these resources is still not there. But there are other issues separate and apart from the stress of school. It's the stress of, you know, it came to me again recently. I was speaking to a young graduate, a young high school graduate, had just finished CSEC, did fairly well, and was going on to consider the different sixth forms, community college, and you know, you have the private colleges. And she said to me that she was advised not to go to one particular institution, which I know well, won't call the name. And I said, why was that? And she said the guidance counselor told her that if she didn't have money for hair and nails, nobody go there. And I was like, really? She said, yes, if you go there and you can't keep up with the latest in hair and nails, you're going to feel very out of place, and I know you're going to feel very unhappy. And I had to think about it for a while, but you know, it's something that we have known for a long time, that the pressure of keeping up with peers puts a tremendous amount of pressure on our young people. I see it at back to school when everybody is rushing the JanSport school bag when you have cheaper alternatives. I see the rush to have the latest track shoes to make sure it's not a no-name. You must have the Nike or the Puma or the Adidas. Nobody wants any second-rate track shoes. And the sad thing is that many of the families I see struggling to find these trappings are the families that can least afford it. But the kids are under pressure. I see it. I'm very sympathetic. Don't think that I'm just going to dismiss folks and say, boy, you don't need a JanSport bag, or you don't need to have the extension or the braids or the, or the nails for the schools that allow it. Or when graduation time comes, that to graduate in a school uniform instead of the specially made dress and the hairstyle. But the fact is that I can't fault the young people. They feel that they have to keep up to belong. And that puts additional pressure on our young people. And it's something that the system will have to address. I just was listening to a BBC report recently on eating disorders. And it was coming out of South Africa because it was some ordinary South Africans saying that we have to get rid of the myth that eating disorders are a rich people thing or an uptown thing in Jamaica. The fact is that we haven't touched on it, and I'm going to some of the things that we haven't touched on. But diet is another thing that contributes to our mental health, or if I flip it the other way and say, an unhealthy diet puts us at risk of mental illness. But I touch on the eating disorder as something that we should be mindful of. As counselors, as mental health professionals, it's just one more data point, one more symptom that we should be tracking. But I also talk about, I recognize the minister and the ministry's push towards a healthier diet, especially in the schools. Reduce the sugar, reduce the processed carbohydrates, try to get more fresh fruit and vegetable in. It is a struggle because it is costly. Even in Jamaica where they say, boy, mango grow on tree and breadfruit is here and so on and so forth. It's not as simple as that, as we all know. Having a healthy diet in this country is not cheap. But we can't step back from that push because it's one more thing to look at. The big, well, I'll come to this one last. You know, I looked at another situation, the whole issue of barrel children and helicopter parents. We live at two extremes in Jamaica, you know. We have the children who are really raising themselves. And it's a lot of children raising themselves. I've come across many, and when you say, where is mommy? Or she working in Cayman? Where is daddy? We never know daddy. Who is the adults? Or it's grandma or auntie or some other adult who, in many instances, doesn't even live in the same home. It's, on the other hand, you have the helicopter parents. The parents who are obsessed with their children doing well and micromanage every aspect of what the child does, putting the poor kid under so much stress and pressure. We have to find a healthy balance. I want to touch on the young men for a little bit. It has been said over and over, but I'll be remiss of me not to mention the stress that young men in particular feel. And I won't get into the causes, because that would be a long talk today. But the fact is that male underperformance is a real thing in the system. It's a little disturbing to me when I look around and I see the majority of students here are female today. As I say, we're preaching to the choir, Dr. Goldburn. But the males themselves feel a lot of stress, you know. Young men feel a lot of stress because the gender roles in Jamaica, in many instances, and especially at adolescence, is still being worked out. And it is demoralizing for a lot of young men to see their female peers outperform them in the classroom. And it happens in many, many ways, not just, again, that focus on the exam results, but even in how they are treated by the teachers. We have normalized male underperformance to the peril of the mental health of our young men. And it's something that has to be addressed. The last and big one I want to talk about, and I mentioned it before, but it's the whole issue of violence in Jamaica. Jamaica is a very violent country. Jamaica is a very violent country for a country not at war. If we drop out the war-torn countries, I think we're either number 3 or number 4 in the world right now in terms of homicide rate. Our murder rate last year was 56 per 100,000, which is a serious crisis, a serious public health crisis, but that's for another time. I dug out all the studies, and I could recite many of them, but I'll touch on one that I found particularly enlightening, and this is Dr. Elizabeth Ward's study on youth violence in Kingston from 2011. And I've done work with Dr. Ward in the past because I've done work with the PMI, the Peace Management Initiative. But 47% of young people in Kingston have seen a dead body apart from at a funeral. And that number might not reach 47% in the rural areas, but a good proportion of our young people have seen a dead body not at a funeral. 18% had witnessed the physical abuse between their parents, and 60% had experienced physical abuse at the hand of a parent. The frightening number for me was that in Kingston, Dr. Ward estimated that there were 127,000 unattached youth. The fact is that we can't avoid the issue that in this violent environment, our young people are suffering. We might shrug it off or normalize it. I know too many young people who on the way to school have passed a dead body, whether the victim of a homicide, the victim of an accident. It is traumatic. We might shrug it off, but the fact of even normalizing death is in itself troubling because we have become desensitized. Bigger than this conference can manage, but we have to recognize that these things all contribute to the mental illnesses that are plaguing our young people. After we have finished school, the other hurdle we have is getting a job or finding something meaningful to do. We have defects in the educational system. We have challenges with even accessing what we have as education. The vast majority of students in the cohort to graduate are still not attaining the 5 subjects, including English and math, that is deemed the minimum standard. And even those that do, and even those, many of whom have first degrees from university, are still not finding jobs commensurate with their level of education. It is troubling, and it no doubt leads to further stress and creates an environment for vulnerability to mental illness. As a fan of social media, it hurts me to say that social media has not helped in these situations, because in many instances, social media has only served to magnify the issues that I have just outlined. But the greatest one I see social media magnifying is a sense of dissatisfaction among people when they look at the fantastic lifestyles that their peers and friends are living. Because people only post nice stuff about themselves, you know. But it magnifies the sense of missing out, of dissatisfaction. Separate and apart from the fact that studies are now showing that more than 2 hours of screen time a day has negative implications for your mental health. That's another long discussion, Dr. Leiber. Well, folks, I'm sorry that I have gone into so much. I'm feeling depressed myself after reading all of this. But I came here to think about what are we going to do next? Well, there are really 4 building blocks, and I'll break it down in that way. We need to nurture a positive family, peer, and community relationships. Let's say it again. Positive family, peer, and community relationships. We need to minimize adverse experiences. We need to develop mentally friendly education and employment. And finally, and this is where the health sector and Councillor Oliphant and his team become important. We need to respond early and well to the first signs of distress in our young people. What can young people do? They need to be in good physical health. They need to exercise, eat a balanced diet. They need to have time to be young people. Helicopter parents are hearing this? They need time to be young people. Freedom to play. Not more than 2 hours a day on screens, though. And screen time includes television. I hate to say it. They need to be part of a family and communities that get along well. They need to go to schools that look after their overall well-being. And they need to be part of a community, take part in other activities, community activities. They need to feel loved, trusted, valued, and safe. They need to be interested in life and the opportunities. However limited we may think they are, we need to be interested in the opportunities that are all around us. We need to be hopeful and optimistic. We need to be able to learn and grab every opportunity to succeed. We need to be comfortable with who we are, accept who we are, love who we are. We need to have a sense of belonging to family, to our schools, to our communities. We need to feel that we're in control of our own lives and destinies. And we need to build up the strength and capacity to cope when things don't go as planned and things go wrong. But there are challenges. I don't want to just reel off these things and say they are easy to attain. Why aren't we accessing help when we need it? The first is always expense. And this is why, Reverend Chong, this is why I've sent so many people down by you. We need more accessible services to help young people when they are in distress. But before we do that, we have to increase the knowledge. And I say here we are preaching to the choir. This is a fantastic occasion. And you know, I took out the material and I even sent it out on social media to say to my friends that the Ministry of Health has a lot of useful material for parents and peers. So there's a lack of knowledge, but we need to do a lot more to raise the awareness of mental health issues in Jamaica. We need to reduce the stigma. We need to stop calling people mad people and this and that. We have to reduce it. We have to reduce the stigma. Young people, I know a lot of young people feel that their families are already trying their best and struggling and they don't want to be a burden on their families. But it's important you take some charge or some responsibility where you can of your own mental health. And where you can't manage, seek out adult help. But counselors, pastors, all of the folks who normally bear the burden of the counseling, one of the things that have come out of the surveys is that many young people don't feel that they can trust the folks with very, very important confidences. Many things are happening in the lives of our young people that they want somebody trusted to share with. So trust is going to be sacrosanct and it's going to have to be developed in the frontline workers in this issue. Coming back again to stigma, we have to get over the fear of being judged, and that again comes with more and more and deeper education and understanding. The lack of support will be addressed with a deeper and greater understanding of the mental health issues. I saw one figure, and I don't know if it is accurate, but Linton Weir, principal of the Old Harbour High and president of the Association then of Principals and Vice Principals, in a Gleaner interview in 2016, noted that the ratio of guidance counselors to students in Jamaica was 1 to 600. Let me say it again. The ratio of guidance counselors to students in Jamaica was 1 to 600. I don't think that that number is inaccurate, and I don't think that that number has changed much since 2016. So, well, I'm sorry the minister is not here. Well, I need the minister. I need the other old man running, you know, the Minister of Education. When he's here next, I will whisper that in his ear. Generally, there have been improvements, and the fact is that this conference today is a measure of the improvement in terms of us moving forward to raise awareness, to spread the knowledge, to understand the issue as it stands before us. Generally, as you could tell from what I said earlier, there is much work to do on the part of the state to make our community safer, to adjust the education curriculum to make it less stressful on the students, to ensure that opportunities are placed in the school day, especially for sports and other physical activities, to keep our young people physically healthy, because mental health and physical health go hand in hand. Sadly, over the years, you had a good Monroe education. I'm sure even as much as you may not have been a great footballer, you had to play football. You had to run track and field, and you had to play cricket. All of us did. I was a terrible sportsman in my school days, I'm not embarrassed to say. But that did not preclude me from having 2 days a week, every Tuesday and every Thursday at 2 o'clock, to spend 3 hours on the play field doing some physical activity. Unfortunately, over the years, the high schools in Jamaica in particular have made us a nation of spectators and less a nation of participants, because we have opted out of physical activity in the schools. We need to bring it back for many, many reasons, not least the mental health of our young people. I talked about 600 guidance counselors per student. Well, the country of Jamaica has 40 psychiatrists, which is 1 psychiatrist per 70,000 people. The southern region, in our system, we have 1 full-time psychiatrist, poor Dr. Garvey, for 600,000 citizens. And yet still, I talk from time to time with the folks in the social worker community, and there are about 2,000 qualified social workers in Jamaica. And they feel that they're underutilized. It comes back again, Councillor, to join up government and us working in partnership with the other agencies to address these issues. We address a lot of issues jointly with the Municipal Corporation on public health. But mental health will have to be a part of the public health. Now, my RD will say there are only 16 public health inspectors in the parish of Manchester, a parish of almost 200,000 people. And they are dealing with food service establishments and many, many other things. But the nurses, the health centers, the mental health nurses, and I'll tell you, the mental health team in this parish does a fantastic job. Oh, they're here? RD knows, because sometimes I feel like I'm the inspector going around. No, but to give an example, just the other day I saw a woman on Manchester Road. And by the time I was able to make the call and turn back, the team was there looking after the poor lady on the roadside. I don't know how they do it, but it's not easy work. But what this all calls for is that we need some alternate strategies, because we're not going to increase the number of psychiatrists, the number of psychologists, the number of counselors over time. Sorry, in the short term. But we certainly can increase public awareness. Much as we have an initiative for Jamaica Moves and we have an initiative about healthy eating, we need to raise the level of public education and public awareness of mental health issues. And for those of you who like to read, you should go back online and find Dr. Elizabeth Ward's study, because in it, there was a very illuminating slide where it talks about the cost of intervention now, and they talk about intervention later. And investing now in better mental health actually saves us a lot of other costs down the line, not to mention personal grief, individual disappointment, and unhappiness. But even in terms of the dollar value of intervening now, of having more robust counseling services in our schools, more robust counseling services in our health centers, parents who are more aware, community leaders who are more aware, public health inspectors who are more aware of these issues and know how to steer and guide our young people to getting help, will save us a lot of other costs, economic, social, and personal, in the future. I want to wrap up with one little saying I came across. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, who is well known in the US, known as a politician, but less well known, but even more significant as a social worker, said that our children need our presence, P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E, more than our presence, P-R-E-S-E-N-T-S. It sounds like a very simple message. But even in the poorest of families, I have found that young people, children, have done very, very well when you have parents who are sensitive, who are engaged, who are present. Let us not be fooled to think that going overseas to send back $100 remittance every week and making sure they have the latest fashion is as important as being here to guide your young child, your children, your young people through the most turbulent period in their lives. Adults, we have that responsibility. I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak this morning. I wish for the organizers of this conference a productive and meaningful conference. I know it will be. Young people, I urge you to do the LLP, listen, learn, and preach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wayne Chen. You said it all, and you said it very well. Just to let you know that a media campaign is in the pipeline, so please listen out for it, please participate and learn as much as you can from it. That's one. Two, PAHO WHO actually helped us to do what is called an investment case in mental health. So we're hoping to publicize that. Really, by investing X amount of dollars today, we'll save 2X or 3X amount of dollars in the future. So that is another statistic that we hope to publicize in that campaign. Without further ado, I'll ask Nurse Lorraine Brown to come and do a presentation to Mr. Chen.
Okay, Mr. Chen, on behalf of the community mental health team in the southern region and across the island, I wish to give to you this small token of our appreciation for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today to celebrate with us Mental Health Week, and for just being here and giving us such encouraging words. Thanks again for being here with us.
Thank you.
And because we're expecting Dr. Holder, Mr. Bent, and Dr. Harris to remain with us, we're just going to present a token to Reverend Chung. Because I'm sure Reverend Chung and Mr. Chen probably have other places to go.
Reverend Anthony Chung, on behalf of the Ministry of Health and Southeast Regional Health Authority, I think it's a great privilege in presenting you this small token for your lovely invocation this morning. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen and young people, it is now 10:45. Coffee break should have been 10:10. But we put enough margin in the program for us to really enjoy the camaraderie and the fellowship. We'll now go to coffee break. It is through the doors at the back and under a tent. I think 11:45 to restart. Okay? Good. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the folks on the head table.
What the weather was going to be like. You're here, and that's really, really great. And I'd like to take it also as one's understanding of how important mental health is. we know that we can't continue to ignore mental health issues. And so we're here, raising awareness, getting ourselves informed so that we can go out and do as we need to do. I just want to remind you of a few things. One, we have a WhatsApp number by which you can send in your questions. We're going to have a question and answer section after all the presenters have made their presentations. So there's a WhatsApp number for you to send in your questions. And that number is 876-774-7654. Yes. Okay. All right, let me repeat the number. Can you hear me in the balcony? Great. Okay. So the number for WhatsApp is 876-774-7654. Whatever questions, send them in and they'll be answered afterwards. And also, we want to take the opportunity to do some depression screening. You know, 1 in 5 people are likely to be depressed or have some symptoms of depression. So in this population, it's not unlikely. All right, so avail yourselves of the opportunity. It doesn't hurt. In fact, it is likely to help to open another chapter in your life. And if you're a group, you have friends. Everybody has friends, eh? So again, 1 in 4 persons are likely to have a mental problem, eh? So maybe you should check on your friends. And if your friends, if the other 3 are okay, then the 1 in 4 in the group is who? Check it out. All right, we are going to go into our presentations, and I have the pleasure of bringing to you our first presenter in this section. He is in the post of a clinical psychologist at the Bellevue Hospital. He has a master's in counseling psychology, and he has been working for the past 15 years in that capacity. He has other hats too, but in the interest of time, we will welcome Mr. Andre Davis. Let's make him welcome.
We are going to be speaking about the topic here of the psychological impact of human trafficking. Human trafficking is a human rights crisis, a form of modern-day slavery with a high-profit, low-risk crime for traffickers, creating the 3rd largest criminal industry in the world, outranked only by arms and drug dealing. United Nations estimates that thousands are trafficked annually, a crime that occurs much more as a process rather than an event. So if we look at this particular slide, you will see the actual cost. The profit to the traffickers is over 150 billion, while in terms of the amount of victims worldwide, we have probably about 21 million persons who are in modern-day slavery. And 71% of those are women, 29% are boys or men. And we find that that is a similar situation for those who are actually trafficked to Jamaica and in Jamaica. So trafficking is not just a situation that is a worldwide phenomenon, it's a phenomenon in Jamaica. It is actually impacting our people and in a large percentage, the young persons of our nation. And so that's one of the reasons why we have decided to highlight this issue in our conference today. So you see that a number of the persons who are trafficked, 58% experience sexual exploitation, 38% experience going into forced labor, and then 80% are used for organ trafficking. So in other words, they will actually either abduct somebody and take the person's organs, or they will coerce or trick the person and take out the person's kidney, or find a way to get a liver, or find a way to get a retina, or find a way to get stem cells so that they can use that as a means of actually moving and kind of producing for the medical industry persons who have those kinds of needs. So this is a very, very serious issue. So what about Jamaica? How many persons have actually been trafficked to Jamaica? I'm going to give you some figures that goes back through up to 2015. This is not the most current information, but as you see, we have had persons trafficked to Jamaica from Haiti, from Guyana, from India, from Panama, Colombia, Honduras, and some of the current countries that we've had is from Italy. We've had persons who predominantly have been trafficked by using social media, which is, of course, for your generation, is a dominant way in which you communicate, especially through the means of the dark web. How many of you know about the dark web? A lot of young people will know how to get on the dark web, right? For those of us who are like my age group who have never heard of the term dark web, it's the alternative web that you can access by using particular browsers and other means to be able to get information. So if I wanted to get a specific type of person, let us say I wanted a young lady. She needed to be 16 years old. She needed to have Indian hair, what we call Indian hair. She needed to be, you know, slim built. She needed to have large breasts. And if I give that specific order to someone on the dark web, and I pay in Bitcoins, and I stated, I want this person to be delivered to me at 5 o'clock at such and such address, somebody will come up and will say, all right, this is what I will do for you. This is the contact number, so on, and then that person will be delivered. That is what is taking place in the world and in our country today. So human trafficking and exploitation of children and adults have profound health consequences for those who have been entrapped. It is known that experiences of abuse, exploitation, and exposure to violence affects the mental health of those who have been trafficked. Trafficked victims differ in gender, age, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, level of education, and country of origin. As you have seen, we have persons who have been brought to Jamaica, but we also have persons who have been trafficked in Jamaica, because you can traffic someone by moving them from Montego Bay to Kingston, or moving them from Mandeville to Port Antonio, or you can move the person from one bedroom to another bedroom according to the laws of Jamaica, because that is part of what is considered to be trafficking. You need to have a couple of things for trafficking to take place, and I'll talk to you about the process a little bit later. So don't think that it's just the poor who are actually trafficked alone. We have persons who are professionals, who have actually ended up being trafficked, and who are in absolute shock that they actually got themselves trapped. What they did was that they probably answered an ad in a paper, or they saw something on the internet, and they answered, and they responded, and the persons kind of, you know, treated them in a very positive way. And of course, they end up going to the site, and then they end up being trapped and finding themselves in deep, deep distress. So who is at risk? Children, in terms of those who are missing, run away, who come from an unstable home life, who have been sexually abused, persons in poverty, physically abused, neglected, those who have mental health issues, persons who are from the LGBT community, those who struggle with substance and alcohol abuse. Adults now, similar kind of track. Somebody who is in poverty, somebody who is seeking to get a better future with limited opportunities, somebody who has had complex trauma already, and so that leaves them vulnerable with various kind of educational levels, looking to provide for their children, again, who have mental health problems, who might come from the LGBT community, and who might substance and alcohol misuse. So it's interesting that the survey is conducted internationally, and the clinical experience that we have within the Caribbean context validates the presence of particular kinds of illnesses, mood disorders like major depression, pervasive depressive disorder, dysthymia, which is where you are depressed every single day for more than 2 years, right? Very often persons who have gone through abuse or who have come from an environment where there is a lot of stress or there has been violence in the family can develop what I call this low-grade depression. And so it leaves them very vulnerable. It leaves them very miserable. They have a lot of challenges in their thinking, and we'll talk more about that. Those with anxiety disorders. And of course, the dominant thing that we tend to find for the persons who have been trafficked is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is really coming out of the trauma that they have actually experienced. So these mental symptoms are very strongly associated with self-harm, suicidal ideation, which means that the person thinks a lot about how to kill themselves, might plan different ways to kill themselves. They might have suicidal attempts. They might become very aggressive. So mental health screening and doing all of that is critical as you actually help persons to become integrated back into society after they've actually been recovered. But they need treatment to be able to function. Diagnosing the health needs of trafficking persons is often very complex because their symptoms generally reflect the kind of accumulative effects of the health risks that they face throughout the trafficking process. So what do I mean by the trafficking process? First, you have to have act. For somebody to be considered to have been trafficked, there needs to be act, there needs to be means, there needs to be purpose. So first of all is recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring the person, receipt of persons. Then the means, by use of threat or the use of force, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power or vulnerability. For example, if the person was mentally retarded or what we call has a cognitive disability, the person is not able to fully reason or to kind of take certain kind of decisions, they might be somebody who could be easily exploited. Giving payments or benefits to the person as a means of really luring and deepening and entrapping the person into this whole thing. Then that includes exploitation, such as taking them into forced commercial sex, and the work of others, sexual exploitation, forced labor, debt labor, involuntary servitude, slavery of different kind of practicing, removal of organs, and other forms of extortation. For example, in Jamaica, you see some of the guys who are involved in wiping the screens at the stoplights. Some of them are actually trafficked. They have been moved from one location to the next because of gangs and the movement of gangs in our country. That now puts them in a vulnerable place. So, very interesting. This is stuff I'm sure that maybe some of you have never actually been exposed to. But it is important for young people to understand the kinds of issues that are taking place around them and among their peers. In the most extreme cases, traffic-related abuse and post-trafficking psychological symptoms can be compared to violence, restrictions, psychological reactions defining what we call torture victims. So the symptoms that they have would be what you would find with somebody who has actually been tortured. The characteristic features of torture and trafficking and life-threatening events and persistent stress, repetitive and chronic danger places that person in a situation where life is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and it intensifies their trauma. So, physical and mental health symptoms in a trafficked person are often intertwined, in particular during the acute period during or immediately after the trafficking situation. Somatic symptoms, and by somatic we mean symptoms that affect the body with a clear organic cause, are not uncommon, but require through assessment to ensure that underlying organic causes are not missed. In trafficked persons, there are many symptoms often interact with and are exacerbated by post-traumatic stress reactions, traumatic events, and even sleep disorders. These post-traumatic stress symptoms contribute to the overall poor health status of persons who have been trafficked. So what is the physical impact of human trafficking? Scars and physical abuse, burns, STIs, HIV, cervical cancer risk, brain damage, seizures, infertility, abuse to the genitals, need for dental reconstruction, need for facial reconstruction, incontinence and loose bowel movements. The person might be gang raped. For example, we have instances in Jamaica who were persons who were abducted or who were trafficked, and they were raped 30 times in one night. Right? So that's one young lady raped 30 times in one night. It's serious stuff, guys. And remember, it's not just women who are trafficked. We have young men who are also trafficked. I have a client who was trafficked, male, going through the process. I've worked with persons who have been trafficked for the past 7 years. And so a lot of these symptoms are what we see happen with the clients. So, you know, the need for amputation of body parts because the person has gone through such a severe trauma. Tattoos and branding is also, although tattoos and branding is a very common feature for persons in your generation, right? What we know is that branding and tattooing is a common way in which the pimps and the traffickers will actually brand their clients so that everybody knows that this person belongs to me. So they actually take the person as an item. The person is not treated as a human being. The person is a product. And the younger you get the product, the longer the shelf life, which means that you get more money from the person, right? So this is what it is. It's not about this person being treated in some kind of way. All right. So I want to move from, let us move from that one to the social impact.
I'm sorry, we've had to have a break in transmission. Mr. Bento RD needs to go and somebody's blocking him. The license number is 8885GH. 8885GH. You're blocking them, Mr. Bento. Thanks.
The social impact of human trafficking. Isolation from peer group. Disconnection from community, disconnection from mainstream society, lack of life skills, lack of training and job experience, homelessness, disconnection from the educational system, lack of access to formal financial institutions. Let's move on. What is damaged psychologically? First of all, the self-concept is damaged. Self-goals, because the goal is now to please the trafficker. PTSD symptoms, post-traumatic stress symptoms, the dissociation, and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. The development of paranoia. Paranoia is where you have this belief that the world is against you. People are dangerous. So you won't eat from certain people. You won't talk to certain people. They will actually instill in the persons who have been trafficked that police are not, you're not supposed to trust policemen. You're not supposed to trust particular persons because they will hurt you. They will transport you back overseas. They will take you or lock you up. So they will lie to the person purposefully so that the person can be entrapped. Sleep disturbances, of course, as I mentioned. The psychological impact continues. Disruption of healthy psychological development. ability to form and enjoy intimacy and close, healthy bonding is profoundly affected. The impulse to recreate and revisit traumatic events. People say, why did the person stay? Why does a person keep repeating the same cycle? Because some persons, after they have been rescued, end up going back into trafficking. Because one of the results of trauma is repetition, what we call compulsive repetition. So you repeat the same process to actually try to heal the original pain that is there. The person has difficulty with regulating their emotions. We talked about the person experiencing severe anxiety. Let's move on, next slide. Anger and rage is very common with persons who have gone through trafficking. An aversion to being touched. So can you imagine a young lady who has gotten pregnant, she was trafficked, she has the baby, she does not want that child to breastfeed. She does not want to touch that child because she had been so severely impacted by what has taken place out of the trafficking process. The loss of sexual desires, profound grief, feelings of helplessness, profound shame. A very, very common feature for persons who have been trafficked. And I go on, hypersexualization, where the person only sees their worth in terms of sex. Move on. Self-blame. The person engages in self-blaming attitudes and believes that it is their fault why they were actually trapped, why they were coerced, why they were brought into trafficking. So how do you actually trap somebody? How do you actually go into that person's mind and change their mentality? This actually becomes a part of the trauma eventually. So what you do with the person is that you isolate them. One of my clients, they kept the person blindfolded for weeks. When they transported the person from one location to the next location, they transported the person at a certain time of night so the person could not see where they were going. They kept the person in a locked away room and that person had to endure that for a long period of time. What does that do? It changes your sleeping patterns. It changes your ability to process. The person then monopolize your perception. They induce disability and exhaustion. So they will purposefully starve you, purposefully make you go without sleep for many, many, many hours so that they can actually begin to brainwash you and gain control over you. This is what happens. Occasionally then, I will give you a little gift. I'll give you a little reprieve. I'll make you go outside for 5 minutes. And then you will actually begin to think that I am being good to you, I'm being kind to you. What that does is that it changes the person's ability to feel as if there's a sense of control. Then they will demonstrate that they're all powerful. They're the only ones who can actually help you and save you or control your life or make life better. So you begin to buy into that whole process. And eventually that's going to lead to degradation. So your boundaries begin to go and you lose your sense of yourself. This is what happens to our clients who go through trafficking. Heightened use of defense mechanisms. They will dissociate, which means that they'll just kind of blank out, steer. They're lost. They're not connected to reality as a means of trying to cope with the pain. Let's move on. And this eventually leads to post-traumatic stress disorder. The pain of PTSD. I want you to imagine for me all of a sudden your heart is beating fast. You can't breathe. You have a sense of terror. You feel nauseous, sick to your stomach. You feel you're starting to shake because all of a sudden the memories of a traumatic incident that you went through keeps coming back to you. You're having flashes and you're reliving the experience. Suddenly your chest starts to hurt you. You have chills going through your body. You cannot almost feel as if you are literally back to what happened how many years or how many months or how many days ago. That is what the clients go through. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event. either experience it as or experiencing it or witnessing it. So if you hear that your family member went through it, you can also begin to experience the emergence of the symptoms. Symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts about the event. The PTSD symptoms are generally grouped in 4 types: intrusive memories, avoidance, negative changes in thinking and mood, changes in physical and emotional reactions. Symptoms may vary over time and vary from person to person. Let me move right. I want to talk a little bit about an aspect of trauma, what we call complex trauma. Complex trauma or developmental trauma disorder. It is not found in the diagnostic manual, but many clinicians are moving to this. And they say that if you went through a form of abuse when you were a child, you have a strong potential for developing this condition. So if you went through neglect, physical and emotional or domestic violence, then this now adds to you becoming vulnerable and having more complex post-traumatic stress symptoms. Let's move on. So, a person who has gone through PTSD may struggle to find the right words to express what they're thinking and feeling. This is due to the prefrontal lobe, which is responsible for language, being adversely affected by trauma, and so disrupts the person's linguistic function. So when the policeman actually is taking a statement from the person, they ask certain questions to be able to elicit information. The person who has gone through trauma might not be able to give accurate information in certain instances because of how the information is stored in the brain, because of the trauma. And also they are not able to fully express all of what they're feeling or what they have gone through. So they might be able to give X at this time, they might be able to give Y at another time, and so the stuff becomes fragmented. We saw that situation with the lady in the States who was giving that, she was talking about being sexually abused when she was a teenager, and she can only remember X, and then they were saying, so why can't she state where she was and when it happened? And that is because she went through trauma. The information was stored in the brain in a particular way. So it affects short-term memory. It creates short-term loss. The person will feel frightened no matter what they're doing because they might begin to re-experience the actual trauma. So PTSD affects the spirit, the soul, the mind, the emotions, the body of the person. These are the things that are impacted. And not only that, we find that persons who have gone through PTSD might have what we call comorbid disorders. There might be other disorders on top of the PTSD that can emerge. For they might actually have generalized anxiety disorder, which is where you worry about everything. Everything under the sun is an issue of worry for this person. They might use a substance to try to deal with the pain. They might have anger, but anger of the type that is what I call the rage of wild bulls, where they might go into such a state of anger and they could literally rip apart a room, rip you apart as well because of that kind of rage that comes out of that person. And of course, they might develop neuropsychological impairments, chronic pain, other issues might emerge. It might even go into psychosis. A number of my clients that I have seen develop major depression, which is a mood disorder, and on top of that, they began to move into psychosis. And so treatment and early intervention for persons who have been trafficked is critical. So I talked about the persistent depressive disorder before, which is where the person is depressed every single day for more than 2 years. A number of my clients have gone through this as well because they were having issues from long before. And so these things actually impacted them. And then now, on top of this, they're now going through this trauma. Major depression, a common issue for persons who have experienced, yeah, we can just move to the next one. Yeah, major depression. Right, so persons who have gone through major depression, they generally have symptoms of feeling depressed most of the day. They have a markedly diminished interest they lose a sense of loss of interest in many things. They might have either weight loss or weight gain, insomnia, hypersomnia. They might have psychomotor agitation, retardation, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, excessive and inappropriate guilt. So, and some people in turn develop what we call personality disorders. Generally, we find the emergence of things like borderline personality disorder, move up, to, you might see histrionic personality disorder might emerge, which is where the person is what we call a drama queen or a drama king, where they become, they're very superficial, they have a lot of difficulty, they're excessively emotional, attention-seeking behavior, right? That becomes a part and parcel of actual survival. So it reshapes their personality. Time check. How much more? 3 more minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So let's move down to trauma bond, because I want to end here. Trauma victims continue to recreate the trauma in some form for themselves. In the instance of persons who have experienced being trafficked, they show ongoing signs of trauma. They're intensely grateful for small kindness that is shown to them. They might deny the violence and the threats of violence that have actually occurred to them. They might rationalize the violence. They might deny that the exploiter is actually angry and has abused them. And they believe that they actually have some control over the abuse. And they believe that they control the situation as well, because they think that they can lessen it. They can control the pimp. They can control their customers. They can control the traffickers. That kind of thinking begins to emerge, and then that is then tied in with self-blame and abuse. This now creates the opportunity for what we call Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is a condition in which the person develops an alliance with the captors as a survival strategy during captivity. They might develop feelings of love resulting from a bond formed between the captor and the captives during intimate time spent together. They are generally considered irrational, and they are the ones that will actually fly the case. So in other words, they will resist the police. They will come up with schemes. They will tell lies. They will circumvent the process because they have actually created what we call a trauma bond with the person who actually has abducted them or trafficked them. So the Stockholm Syndrome, it would actually require a whole lot more time to explain, but I want to move down to looking at, as we close off, that there's also damage spiritually. The person may have despair, hopelessness, a lack of belief in humanity, a lack of faith in God. They may even become hyper-spiritual, which means that they become everything is spiritual, right? And all of that is a means to try to dull the pain that they actually feel inside of themselves. And very often they feel abandoned by God. So, how do we respond? Listen attentively and do not be judgmental. Provide security and confidentiality. Manage your own transference issues. The client could treat you as a trafficker or even seek to please you because that is what they have been used to doing. And in that way, they try to manipulate you or they transfer issues to you. Understand the stages of change. Work as a team to help the person. Recognize a client could lie to you, manipulate you, not trust you, even protect the trafficker. Look for the red flags, signs of physical or sexual trauma, injuries in various stages of healing. For those of you who are the persons that work in the health field, you need to be aware of this because somebody who might be trafficked, you might have actually encountered somebody who has been trafficked and didn't realize it. Evidence of lack of care from previous conditions. A kind of discrepancy in the history presentation and a pattern of injury. Subordinate, hypervigilant, or fearful, accompanied by an overprotective companion. By the way, sometimes they will actually, the trafficker will marry the person who has been trafficked. Or will take the person, may even adopt the person legally as a means of also controlling. Very, very interesting, the kind of process that goes on in trafficking. The person has a foreign accent, and they can't tell you anything about Jamaica, about the location where they are. If you live in a country, you must know certain places, right? After a while, you are going to integrate into the place where you live. So the person can't tell you where that building is, where such and such a place is, where the nearest Kentucky, KFC. Everybody in Jamaica knows where you find the latest KFC, right? And the person can't tell you where is the KFC, right? Extreme anxiety, tearfulness or lack of emotion, recurrent sexually transmitted infections, as well as development of regression. For example, they start having bedwetting or they start to have encopresis, the soiling, multiple or frequent pregnancies. So what is the protocol, ladies and gentlemen? Called trafficking in persons. The number is 876-967-1389. That's 876-967-1389 or 922-3771. I want to leave it at that, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Davis. That was more than a mouthful. Every time I hear a topic, a presentation on human trafficking, you know, I get chills. It's just unbelievable what any human being could go through and survive. Okay, so thank you very much. Please put your questions in. Remember to WhatsApp them in. The number is 774-7654. 876 before that, of course. All right, we're going to be moving right along because we have a lot to hear, and I don't want you to fall asleep before lunch. And we have a very interesting presentation. Coming up next, we have a group of 3 or 4 from UNICEF. Who knows what UNICEF means? One of our students, can you tell me yes? United Nations Children's Fund. All right. What about the E? Education, that's right. Okay, well done, well done. Right, so we have, I would call her the team leader, Ms. Alison Brown, and we have at the head table, we have Makeda Brightly, Dana Fletcher, and I'm supposed to remember the other name, Brittany Black. Brittany, okay? Right, I'm going to hand over to Alison as she comes and tells us all about them.
Good morning, everybody. Or are we at afternoon yet? Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. That's better. I'm Alison, and I'm from UNICEF, and I'll just do a very quick introduction of what's coming next. So our session is a little bit different. Can I see the hands of everybody in the audience who's under 30? Dr. Leiber, don't put up your hand. Dr. Goldburn, don't even try it. All right, so quite a few. So this session really is for you. It's designed for you. And we have 3 amazing people who are a little bit closer in age to you. We have ranging in age from 16 to 26 on our panel. The 3 presentations are a little bit different, but they each are tied together by one thread, and that's digital or social media. Now, we know in this changing world that social media can be very positive and can be harnessed for good and be very powerful in a great way. And we also know that it can be very toxic and damaging for the mental health of young people. So our first speaker, Makeda, had a very challenging experience in an online space that affected her emotional and mental health in real life. Our second speaker has had very challenging experiences in her real life, and she has used an online tool not just to help herself, but to help other young people as well, and she's done quite a tremendous job with that. And our third speaker, Brittany, is going to tell you about a new tool, an online tool called YouReport, which is designed for young people ages 13 to 29 and taps into your opinions, your experiences, your feelings on a range of topics. And she'll tell you how we've been using that tool over the last 4 months to find out what's happening with Jamaican young people, where it relates to social media, to mental health, and a range of other issues. So I'm going to ask Makeda to come ahead and join us. Can you please give them a very warm welcome?
My story on cyberbullying. A pleasant afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Makeda Brightsley. I currently attend Oberlin High School, and I'm 16 years old. I have been a victim of cyberbullying for approximately a year now. Cyberbullying is bullying that takes place over digital devices like cell phones, computers, and tablets. Cyberbullying includes sending, posting, or sharing negative, harmful, false, or mean content about someone else. It can include sharing personal or private information about someone else, causing embarrassment or humiliation. Bullying, whether it is traditional bullying or cyberbullying, causes significant emotional and psychological distress. Cyberbullying had a major impact, a negative impact on my life. Cyberbullying for me. So, as it approached Christmas, my school had a fete coming up. Might be wondering what's a fete? Well, a fete is an elaborate festival, party, or celebration. Normally, my friends and I don't attend those events held at my school. However, we decided to go. While at the fete, there was a photographer taking pictures of us. I didn't want to take any pictures, but he was going to be my friends the last year at high school, so I did to leave memories with them. When it ended, everyone went home anticipating their pictures to be uploaded on Facebook. Eventually, the pictures were uploaded. When the pictures were posted, I heard there was this big controversy taking place on WhatsApp. When I went to check my WhatsApp messages on my phone, I saw about 8 missed calls from my best friend. Whenever she calls so many times, something bad is either happening that involves me or even she. So I had the feeling. I returned her call immediately. When she answered, she asked, Mac, because my name is Makeda, so my nickname is Mac. Mac, you know see what them do your pet picture? For me, the stage where I am now, which is having a lot of persons fighting against me, I wasn't that surprised. Hence, I still made it got the best of me. When I saw the picture, my body had a lot of pointing arrows towards it. Things like, who do her eyebrow, because them no look good? Why her breast have so long and she even have a chick or a child? What kind of bead shorts this she wear, and I even Bridget that she wear a fidget? Those criticisms defamed me. Having to think about my picture circulating on the media, mostly WhatsApp, had me torn up inside, deeply torn up. I have had a lot of mixed feelings, such as feeling exposed and humiliated, feeling hungry and vengeful, and most of all, feeling disinterested in life and school. Persons were laughing at me, and also they were asking if I'm not going to make one about her. Yes, I found out who did it, and it was a girl. I paused for a while and thought about why females try to tear down each other instead of building them. While I was scrolling through my phone, someone sent me a picture of the same person who wrote up my picture with pointing arrows on her as well. What she did to me, she did it to about 5 other persons. I wasn't going to be the one to give her my time by making one of her. But she thought it was me because I was the only one who didn't retaliate. So she made a next one about me, speaking some nasty stuff about me. During this, I kept all my emotions inside. Keeping all these emotions all to myself really didn't help me. It led to serious depression. I didn't want to eat, didn't want to talk to anyone. I kept all to myself. But through all this, I used a smile to hide everything, and I prayed. I realized this was not healthy for me, so I started to do a lot of self-reflection. Makeda is always a positive, outspoken girl, and I tend not to listen to everything that is negative about me. Reporting everything to my Dean of Discipline, he told me he will handle the situation. While waiting on my dean, I decided to show her love right through. Because according to the Bible, it says, you are to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Each day that I see her, I continue to smile and just be happy. You maybe went through the same situation or something similar, but these are like tests in life for you to see if you can handle issues like these, because most teenagers go through a lot and don't know how to handle their problems. Never hide something that is affecting you like what I did. Speak about it. That's when persons are going to know what is going on. The help will come. Stay positive. Be bold in everything you do. Never let anyone tear you down. Be like a pineapple. Stand tall, wear a crown, and sweet on the inside. It's time to talk up, youths of Jamaica. Please talk up.
Hi, everyone. Hello? Is it on? Hello? Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Dana Fletcher, and I run a mental health awareness campaign called Embrace Your Unknown. I use social media to normalize conversations on mental health because I feel like our generation... Embrace Your Unknown. Yes. I use social media to normalize these conversations because I feel like sometimes the discussions can be quite academic and like not in everyday circles. I want to use like Facebook and Instagram to share poetry and writing and statistics to just really bring the conversation to, like, you know, younger audiences. So before I get started on my story, I wanted to share a poem that I wrote about my own journey, and I feel like that will fully encapsulate, you know, what I've experienced. This one is called Rose-Colored Glasses. All I see is darkness. These rose-colored glasses only pick up the darkest shades of gray, highlighting all that is wrong and broken in the world. Like my ego and my spirit, and all the dreams I had for myself living a normal, happy life. I carefully curate my words and purposefully filter my photos, hoping it will distract you from the listless droop in my speech, the bloodshot gaunt of my eyes, the gradual division of my soul. Your advice, like the sun, offends me as it makes its way through the clouds, reminding me that I too was golden once. Back when colors felt vibrant, sound smelled melodic, and life tasted like the sweetest honey I'd ever known. Those are all foreign concepts to me now, a language I know I once knew but somehow seem to have forgotten. like ancient hieroglyphs etched in previous lifetimes, waiting to once again be discovered. How do I speak when my vocal cords are bound by a weight so gargantuan it requires my every fiber to utter simple hello? Hello? I ask as I take in the strange reflection in the mirror. I'm caught off guard by the woman who stands staring back at me. Who is this girl with the well-coiffed hair? I do not recognize that crown of curls or that Colgate grin. I do not recognize that self-assured voice, that determined gait, that put-together traveler everyone seems to know and love. Who is she? Because she isn't me. She is collected and calm and cool like the sands of her homeland on a balmy summer day. But I am the shadows of darkness that lurks around every corner, the broken fiddle in the string quartet, the piano chord that is forever out of tune. I am the rotten egg in the batch of 12, that stubborn carton of milk that somehow always dies before its expiry date. I am depressed, until I'm not, until I'm soaring so high that only God can touch me. I'm soaring with the winds, giving life to all the leaves. I am euphoric. My words float with hope like the kite that dances as it's tugged by the howling screams ringing through my soul. You see, I live with bipolar disorder, and it moves me in ways you could only imagine. I throw my words like paint on a new canvas, vibrant, intentional, and messy. My emotions shine like light beams refracted through the sharp-edged prism in my mind. When I glow, I blind you with visions of white so pure, it shocks you, it moves you, and it shakes you. I am the dizzying grandiosity of mania and the suffocating darkness of depression, the fire pits of hell and the golden glow of heaven. I am an advocate, a mental health champion, a survivor. I am other. Okay. So as I mentioned in my poem, I've been living with depression since I was 12 years old. So all the normal symptoms like excessive sleeping, not really eating, having feelings of intense guilt and hopelessness and worthlessness. And I've been living with this basically like half of my life. And my family, they were well-intentioned, but they never really understood what it meant to live with a mental illness. So they'd always tell me things like, cheer up, smile, stop overthinking things, everything's going to be okay. And I moved through life like this. I started going to therapy when I was in university, but I kept it under wraps and like secret because I felt embarrassed. I felt embarrassed that I was living with depression. I felt embarrassed that I was having suicidal thoughts. I felt embarrassed that I just couldn't seem to be happy when everything else was going right. Sorry I'm speaking so quickly, I'm so nervous. So yeah, I was living with this, and then it wasn't until 2 years ago when I started actively considering suicide. And you might wonder, why would anybody ever want to kill themselves? But I was struggling with this pain that just felt so unbearable. The thought of going through my whole life feeling this way, it just felt like it was too much and I couldn't do it anymore. So one day I'm at home with my mom and we're just walking the dog, and I tell her, Mommy, I can't go on like this anymore, I just can't do it. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I really don't think I'm gonna live until I'm 25 years old. And she said to me, Dana, I really don't want to hear that because that's too depressing. I don't want to talk about these things. And I said to her, if I can't talk about this with you, who else am I going to talk about it with? So eventually we call this, I'm living in the States at the time, we call this 1-800 number and spoke to a therapist online. And I basically just read my diary, read all my thoughts to this person. And I said, you need to go to the hospital as soon as possible because she's not okay. So I was hospitalized in a psychiatric ward for 4 days, where I was then talking about just my experience and what I was thinking, what I was going through. And the man said to me, you're too pretty to be depressed. And it was one of those things where I was just like, seriously? I have to try and prove my depression to you? It shouldn't be that, you know? It shouldn't be someone trying to prove that they're sick or prove that they're ill. So eventually I got taken out of the hospital because my mom was just like, this is not a good place for her. Went to a psychiatrist and she asked me, tell me about yourself, tell me about what you're going through. So I told her everything. I told her about the suicidal ideation, told her about the self-harm, told her about the drinking, told her about the excessive sleeping, told her about the grandiose ideas like wanting to move to a different country and actually just doing it, buying plane tickets, you know, going out shopping, like all the reckless, impulsive things. And she said to me, you have bipolar 2 depression. You also have panic disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. And when I got diagnosed with these things, it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulder. Because if you're living with something for so long in your life, and then you finally find out that, no, you're not crazy, this is like a condition, this is a medical condition, that you can get treatment and medicine and therapy to help you heal. It felt like a new chapter of my life. So once I learned this, I realized there's so many people in the world who are going through the same thing that I'm going through, but it's not a conversation that's ever had in public spaces, private spaces, with your family, with your friends, with anybody. So I decided to launch this social media campaign called Embrace Your Unknown. I call it Embrace Your Unknown because living with a mental illness or any kind of mental health condition does feel like an unknown because it's not spoken about. And in order to truly become better, you have to embrace it and all the difficulties that come along with embracing it. So I launched this campaign and I wrote an article called Too Pretty to Be Depressed, which was a throwback to that one nurse that told me that. And I talked about my diagnosis. And the outpouring of love and support that I received was so powerful and so validating. I decided to launch it into a full campaign. And yes, I'm not going to lie to you, there were people who were negative and, you know, the cyberbullies saying, oh, she's crazy, she must be on drugs, she's attention seeking. But for every one person that said something negatively to me, there was like 10 other people who were like, keep going. My uncle is living with bipolar disorder. I've been struggling with anxiety since I was 15. Like, you know, it was a way for other people to be seen and to be heard. So I continue doing this, and it's mostly online. I share poetry, I share articles, and I allow other people to share their stories anonymously or in person or with their name attached if they would like. But what I've started doing now is actually hosting in-person events where I bring panelists, psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists to discuss different topics. And this way, I can allow people to really explore their own journeys in a safe space where they don't necessarily have to speak about their own experiences, but they can learn about different mental illnesses and mental health conditions. So that's my story. Thank you. Thank you. So that is my story, and if anybody wants to connect with me, my information is there. It's at Embrace Your Unknown on both Facebook and Instagram. Or if you want to send me an email, it's hello@embraceyourunknown.com. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany Black, and I'm a mental health advocate, and I just graduated from UE with a degree in psychology. I'm very proud of it. And I'm also a U reporter. And today I'll be talking to you briefly about U Report. I'd like to turn your attention to the screen for just a minute. Well, that was supposed to be a really exciting video about your report, but that's okay. So I'd like young people to raise your hands if you are between the ages of 13 and 29 and own a smartphone. Wonderful. Now, let me see those hands again. If you're a young person and you feel you have some burning issue that you've always wanted to talk about, but you don't really know how to, what platform to go on to speak about it. So just raise your hands if you're like that. Okay, great. That's awesome, because today I want to share with you YouReport. Now, YouReport is this exciting initiative that is geared towards giving thousands of Jamaican youth just like you a voice. Young people are leading the conversation, so no longer are we left in the dark and just tagging along, not sharing our views on issues happening in Jamaica. YouReport is a free social messaging tool that allows youth from any community across Jamaica to respond to polls, access information, and work as positive agents of change on behalf of the people of our country. Now, I know we all use our smartphones, as we indicated, and we connect with people on social media on a daily basis. In one of the polls, youth, just like you, stated that the average time spent on social media was 5 hours per day. I know from time to time we sit with our smart devices for a few minutes, and it turns into hours and hours without our realizing. So YouReport is perfect for you, since polls can be done within 5 minutes. YouReport allows youth to speak out through Flow text messaging, Facebook Messenger, and Twitter on issues affecting their community and the country at large. So when a poll is sent out, you just sit with your smart device and answer as accurately as possible. And the best part is, you will be answering questions about things we know you are concerned about. Things like cyberbullying, things like mental illness, mental health, things like teenage pregnancy. In one recent poll done on mental illness, 90% of youth said that they don't believe Jamaicans take the mental health of young people seriously. And in a follow-up poll we did, the youth believed this to be as a result of the misconceptions surrounding the issue. Being a mental health advocate, those results just made me feel incredibly uneasy, because young people are going through something that's completely normal, yet feel as though not much care is placed on ensuring their mental health is taken care of. And there is still not enough being done in regards to public education on the issue. Mental illness is such a real problem, and youth need to be able to talk about a very human experience without fear of being judged. 53%, that's more than half the population of the female respondents to the poll on mental health and suicide, stated they have considered suicide. But we don't like talking about suicide, right? Because it's sad. The fact is, suicide is a major global health concern and one of the leading causes of death worldwide. 41% of youth, just like you guys sitting here, believe that social media is the greatest contributor to their mental health concerns than any other factor. With these alarming data, YouReport needs you. Everyone has to dispel the stigma about talking about mental health. The more we destigmatize talking about mental health and mental illness, the more we will be able to, as a country, take the steps necessary to create this web of support that our youth need in dealing with mental illness. Talk about it. Open up to someone, because we can and we need to start having very human conversations about a very human experience that's also affecting our youth. YouReport has created this comfortable space where youth can feel free to share and become enthusiastic about effecting change, So with that, I charge you today to take action and become a U reporter. All you need is your smartphone or your tablet. Speak out on what's happening in your community. Use your report results and information to update and increase your awareness. Participate in nationwide campaigns to help improve your country. And if you want something to talk about among your friends, share what's happening around Jamaica and seek to be the change that Jamaica needs. Now, I'd like you to write off the information on the screen about U-Report, how you can start being a U-Reporter, how you can join. You just need Flow and Facebook Messenger, and I'm sure a lot of us use Facebook Messenger, which is, pretty easy. You just log into Facebook and text join, and then you become a U-Reporter. It's that easy, young people. Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause, please. I didn't hear that applause. Yeah, that's more like it, yeah. Do we have youth in this room? Right, man, we need to hear you. We must thank our presenters so very much for sharing their story and for what they are doing in helping others. I liked what Dana said. For every 90, or was it Brittany, sorry. 90% of youth, they don't take mental health. They think that Jamaicans don't take mental health seriously, and that is so very true. But yes, Dana said something that resonated with me. For every one person that said something negative, there were 10 who were saying something positive. And I've been advocating that persons with mental illness need to talk about it, need to say, I have it. I know why we don't, but we need to move from that level. And now is the time to begin. Do I hear right on? All right. Okay, I may have to take a break, but I'm going to introduce our next speaker. And he is Dr. Terence Bernard. Dr. Terence Bernard, he is the consultant psychiatrist at the Kingston Public Hospital. You know there was a psychiatric unit there, or they do manage persons there with psychiatric illnesses. So he is spearheading the work there, and he's doing great things, I know. So without further ado, are you ready, Dr. Bernard? Okay, while he gets himself. Okay, so let's welcome Dr. Bernard as he delivers on the topic of danger signs of mental health problems in youth.
Thank you. Can I have your water?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Garvey. Okay, I need my prop. Okay, danger signals and indicators of mental health problems in youth, how to recognize and how to seek help. I want to start out by saying, now Dr. Milburn isn't going to like me for this, but while I was preparing my presentation, my mind ran across her because I was using an intake form that she was instrumental in developing many years ago. And it's a legal-sized document that has quite a few pages. I'm not sure if any of the child guidance clinics are using it anymore, but I have a copy of it on my computer, and I have plagiarized it and used it in all kinds of ways. And I just want to take this moment to, I don't know if it was planned in the program, but I just want to recognize Dr. Pauline Milburn. She's the First Lady of Child Psychiatry in Jamaica. And as you can see, she continues to support us. And I mean, doesn't she look very youthful herself? Yes, indeed. Welcome. All right. Now, I am not a child psychiatrist, but I am one of that 10% of Jamaican adults that take youth mental health seriously. And for that reason, I may still yet become a child psychiatrist because I still have a few more years. But Dr. Milburn was, well, when I was doing the residency, she was the person who taught us. And I remember when I left the residency, I was interested in children and adolescents. And the presentation that I'm going to share with you is very close to my heart because I developed a system. Now, this is not an academic presentation, and I know that this is a mixed audience, and so the presentation I'm hoping will help to simplify things for persons who are having difficulties. A presentation like this is very important because there are resources available for children with mental health problems. But a lot of the times those resources are not known. And yes, we know that they're not always adequate. One of the things, I work in the correctional services among the juveniles, and so I tend to see the end product of the missing of the danger signals. And even in my private practice, where I do see young people, even when the parents are aware that there's a problem in the child, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, it is so difficult for them to mobilize themselves because you may make them aware of the resources available, but you find that there is something preventing them. And so sometimes I see these children falling through the cracks because the system is not being mobilized to help them. And so that is going to be the emphasis that I would like to place. Now, when we talk about youth mental health, and I know a lot of you are thinking about adolescents, late adolescents, and so on, but you have to remember that these young people were babies once. And I like to start the narrative from the very beginning. And so that is how I'm going to be looking at it. So in my own practice, when I'm taking a history, in order to simplify it, I look at the different stages. So from birth to basic school. But of course, I go further backwards than that. I go to the antenatal history because that is very important. But then once they're born, from birth to basic school, then there's basic school, and then there's primary school. And of course, you have different stages of primary school. And then you go to high school from grade 7 to 8, and then grade 9 to 11. And at that stage now, you enter into late adolescence, where many of the problems will now have already been manifested. But the interesting thing is that there are different problems that may arise at each stage. And I think it is very important for us to be aware of those issues, because sometimes the problem that starts at birth or early in life, if it's not properly dealt with, becomes compounded and becomes something else later on. A typical example of this is ADHD. I'm going to just talk about that, although I'm going to refer to it again. I don't know how many of you know, but that ADHD can eventually morph into a conduct disorder, right? Especially if it's not brought under control. So you find that a child who is hyperactive, impulsive, and not paying attention, right? They develop problems in the classroom. They're not learning. They're misbehaving. Nobody likes them, so they get marginalized, ostracized, and sometimes either they start skipping classes or they're expelled from classes. And so they now become at risk because they join the other children that are outside the classroom, and they're up to no good. And so they follow their friends, they end up doing delinquent things, and they become exposed to substance abuse. And you find that somebody who has ADHD, the behaviors might be as a result of a lack of impulse control initially. But what happens is that behaviors become entrenched. And so when you diagnose an ADHD person at a later stage, the medication is not going to be as helpful because it's now learned behavior, okay? And so this is just an example of why it's important for us to see the danger signals and to be aware of it from the very beginning. So I hope my presentation will make sense to you, even though it may not be what you're looking for. Now, these few slides, oh, could you go down to the next two? There's 2 blank slides, and then you go on to the next slide. Thank you. Hold it there for a moment, please. Right. This is definitely from that intake form I was telling you about, all right? And each question on this slide is very important because each of them can tell you something about the child or has an effect on the child. So, of course, the question about whether the pregnancy was planned or not will give you an idea whether the child was wanted or unwanted, okay? Whether the mother received antenatal care or not. Of course, if the mother did not receive antenatal care, then that has negative implications as well because that could result in problems during the pregnancy affecting the developing fetus, and these things can manifest. Illnesses of the mother during pregnancy can also affect the developing fetus. And of course, any hospitalizations of the mother, any medications prescribed, or the use of recreational drugs, all of these can impact on the developing fetus. And you must remember that mental health has to do with the brain, right? The brain is the organ of focus. And so in order for us to have good mental health, we have to have a well-developed brain. So if we exit the womb with a brain that is not well-developed, then that may be the beginning of problems. So there are danger signs even from in the womb. These are some other questions of what can, of course, the length of the pregnancy, premature babies are at risk. Prolonged labor can cause all kinds of problems. Reduced oxygen to the brain is one of them. The mode of delivery, of course, we know that if the person has had to have a cesarean section, then we know that maybe it may have been an emergency, there may have been fetal distress. And if forceps are used, then that also has its complications. And of course, if the child is born at home, attended or unattended, that can also have its complications. The birth weight is important, and whether the baby needed resuscitation. Of course, resuscitation is needed if the baby is born and does not breathe right away. So all of these things can have an impact on the condition of the brain of the child. Now, we go on to milestones. In order for developmental milestones to be what they're supposed to be, you also need to have an intact nervous system. And so if the child has delay in any of those milestones, then it may point to a problem with the brain once again, okay? And there are 2 fairly common disorders that can be reflected in abnormal milestones. One of them is intellectual disability, formerly known as mental retardation, that can result in delayed milestones, as well as certain milestones like language development can be delayed in autistic spectrum disorders. So, so from as early as that, we have danger signals that we can look at. If the child has a past medical history, the nature of the condition can impact the well-being of the child, but also the fact that the child may have suffered illness. This has psychological impacts. Admissions to hospital can also have psychological effect on the child. Psychosocial stressors. Oh, sorry. Could you go on to the next slide, please? The next slide. Right. Now, I want to pause here for a few moments. Child abuse. We know that child abuse is very rampant in Jamaica. There was a time when it was like we saw the tip of the iceberg. We didn't really know what was below the surface, but I think that is becoming evident these days. And child abuse began many years ago. There's the physical abuse, and I don't want to minimize the importance of physical abuse because, you know, there's this debate about corporal punishment, and everybody has their opinions on it. But whatever method of discipline that you use, if it's not applied properly, if it's applied in a harsh way, if it's applied in anger, then it's abusive, okay? And so we have to be aware of that there's been harsh corporal punishment being used in Jamaica over the years. And some of us who might have been victims of it might think it's okay and it's normal, right? Because look how I turned out, you know? But then there are others who will show signs. For example, persons who later present with anger management problems. When you look at the history, there has been harsh physical abuse, okay? I mean, that's not the only cause. Then we go on to sexual abuse. And this one is a very serious one. And I want to pause here because we cannot minimize the importance or the significance of sexual abuse, because I believe that it's the form of abuse that eclipses all the others. I don't know if you disagree with me, Dr. Leiber, but sexual abuse actually causes problems in the person's development. I think Andre was talking about the development of the person, and he was also talking about complex PTSD, and I realized that it's not just victims of trafficking, because if we have children who grow up in an inner city community where there's a lot of violence already, so you have the physical abuse, you have the exposure to violence, and you have the sexual abuse, we do have cases of complex PTSD that can result from that. And so sexual abuse, a lot depends. A lot of persons who develop borderline personality disorder have been sexually abused. If you have persons who are repeatedly attempting suicide or self-mutilating, a lot of the times you will check and see that they were sexually abused. And the sexual abuse is not just coitus, ladies and gentlemen. It's any kind of sexual activity. So even if there was an attempt, even if it was just a fondle, even if it was just putting arguments too, it's very significant, right? Because it has tremendous psychological impact. And also, the earlier in age, the younger in age that it happens, is the more important it is. Because if you have something that interferes with development and it occurs at an early stage of development, then you find that the severity of the pathology is going to increase the younger the child is, okay? And so we need to be aware of that. Of course, emotional abuse, we know it as verbal abuse. There's a lot of verbal abuse also in Jamaica. So all of these things have an impact on the development of the child. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Somebody should wake up. Okay, right, but in our society, there's a lot of exposure to violence. And when you work in the correctional services like I do, those children from the inner cities, they see it as an everyday occurrence and a nothing, you know, everyday thing that. But I can tell you this because I have also dealt with some of the perpetrators. and the perpetrators are also affected by the violence, okay? When you strip them of the weed and the girls and their freedom, and they're just locked up in a place, then the anxiety symptoms will manifest and they're going to want to see the psychiatrist, right? So, you know, the violence is something, and I say, my statement is that you have to be made of stone. If you're not made of stone, then it's going to affect you. And of course, there are other types of trauma. The trauma may be related to the violence, but there might be other causes of trauma, such as motor vehicle accidents, which are also common in certain parts of Jamaica. And of course, Andre mentioned a vicarious traumatic experience. So if you hear about, I'm not sure, was it you who said that? Yes, so if you hear about somebody close to you who has suffered trauma, that can also have an effect on you. And of course, loss, the loss of a loved one, and of course, there's this sociological issue of multiple shifting. Multiple shifting has to do with not only changes in caregivers, but also changes in location. Even moving from one neighborhood to the other, you leave your friends behind and you have to form new friends. And it depends on how far you move as well. And then also shifting of caregivers is a part of that as well. Now, the multiple shifting is something that prevents persons from developing attachments, all right? Right. Next slide, please. Right. Now, we have to look at now the relationships. Now, as the child gets older, we need to know whether the child is getting along with people, right? Because, of course, all of these relationships here are important, right? And, of course, we may have situations where the father is absent, so there is no relationship, which is a problem. Or the father may be present, and there is a bad relationship. That's also a problem, and so on. Now, one would expect that there may be problems with getting along with your parents because, you know, some parents are strict and sometimes we have to kind of resist them a little bit sometimes. I'm not saying that we should disregard that, but what happens is that it's really more of a problem now if they are not able to relate to those of their own age group. If you find that there's a problem in the relationship with the siblings, problem in relationship with their peers, clearly there is a problem. So when you look at relationships, it talks about the ability to form bonds and the ability to get along with people. One of the things that is important for mental wellness is called social and occupational functioning. And you can have certain symptoms of mental problems, but if you have a problem with your social and occupational functioning as a result of those symptoms, then it becomes a disorder. So that's important to look at as well. All right, next slide. Right. Now, you see it's coming straight from the intake from Dr. Milburn. I'm using as plagiarized. Right. So we look at who the child has lived with since birth. In a country like Jamaica, where 90% of children are born out of wedlock, we know that there's a high prevalence of single-parent families, and the absence of the father has become so endemic that we don't really realize the importance of it. It's important, but when the mother is absent, then I say, then dog name your supper, right? Because let me tell you what happens. When the mother takes the child to the father, that's one level of rejection right there. But then the father immediately takes that child and gives it to his mother, his sister, or his girlfriend. And so you have a secondary rejection right there, right? And so all these things are very important for us to know, and that's why these questions are important. Okay, so we have looked at the developmental milestones, and so we start from the antenatal, we come to birth, and we come to the early development. Now, you must understand that there are certain conditions that arise early. So, for example, if there is a problem that's that's detected before the child gets to basic school, then chances are that may be either an intellectual disability or it may be a pervasive developmental disorder like autism, right? A lot of the times these tend to show up before basic school. But then once you get to basic school now, really? Once you get to basic school, I thought I had a short presentation, you know, but maybe I'm talking too much. Yes, once you get to basic school now, you can observe two things. You can observe whether the child is learning, or you can also observe behaviors and interaction with other children. And so that is an opportunity there. So learning problems now become a topic. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to, let me see. All right, these questions, family history, mother's age, when this child was born, father's age, these are important because, you know, the older you get when you're having children, I'm talking about when you pass a certain age, then those things become an issue in the whole process of development. And of course, the parents being alive, the loss of the parents is important. We mentioned loss already. And of course, a family history of mental illness means that there is maybe some genetic predisposition, so the person may be vulnerable to development of mental illness. All right. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through these now. The next slide, please. I mentioned it already. Usually, intellectual disability is apparent when you see abnormal milestones. And a very important milestone to remember, I don't have a slide about it, is the bedwetting. Because bedwetting can tell you a lot of things. Of course, in order for you to develop continence, you need an intact neural brain. And so the bedwetting can be reflected in that, or it can be a reflection of emotional issues. All right? So you have those intellectual disability, pervasive developmental disorders. By the way, PDD is also known as autistic spectrum disorders, okay? And then you have learning disorders. Now, ADHD tends to occur when you go into primary school because the usual age of onset is about 7 to 8 years. And so you may have a child that has done well up until grade 1, and then at grade 1, the problems start. Now, the disruptive behavior disorders like oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder occur later. You find that the ODD tends to occur before puberty, and then the conduct disorder tend to be a part of adolescence. And one of the things that I have noticed, you can change the slide for me. One of the things that I have noticed is that there's something that happens at age 13, 14 when they go into grade 9. You find that that is where the conduct disorder seems to escalate. And then this is now mid-adolescence, you have the mood disorders, and then late adolescence now, you have schizophrenia and the substance use disorders. In Jamaica, sometimes the substance use even starts from earlier, like below the age of 10, right? But in the studies the research that has been done, the average age of initiation is somewhere around 12 or 13, according to the literature. All right, so basically then, if you look at it from this perspective, from birth to basic school, you look at the developmental milestones, you think of PDD and ID. So this is basically a summary of some of the conditions. And that, just to wrap it up now, it's important to seek help. Now, it's very difficult to know where all the resources are, but my advice is that if there is a child that has a problem, I think in the early years, you can take that child to a pediatrician because the pediatrician should be able to do an assessment and refer to the appropriate persons. As they get older, the psychiatrist can get involved. So you have the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, which is available in all the parishes. So it's important for us to have a starting point. I also think that general practitioners, the family doctor, is another place you could go for advice, and they should know where all the resources are. But I just want to emphasize that it is very important that when we see these warning signs, that appropriate action needs to be taken, because if it is not done, then the child will fall through the cracks and will develop problems later on. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Bernal, for giving us a good exposition in a short time. So we have a short time of question and answers, 15 minutes. So I want all presenters to be up here. So are there any burning questions you want to ask the presenters? Okay, we are just technologically savvy in this conference. Here's a WhatsApp question. As a caregiver, how can I speak to, approach and help someone with a mental health problem, such as depression or anxiety, so they can be medically treated or get them to the relevant authority, especially if the person doesn't acknowledge that the fact that they are suffering or has symptoms of depression and anxiety. Who wants to that question?
What is that? No, I didn't hear it.
Okay. I get that the question is that how do you approach somebody who has a mental disorder who doesn't have insight?
Right.
Okay. And you're the caregiver. Okay. And you're the caregiver. It's very challenging because mental illness is one of those illnesses that is characterized by a lack of insight sometimes. And so therefore the person in question may not think that there's anything wrong with them. So it becomes a challenge. And it becomes a challenge in terms of your being a person of great patience and understanding, right? Because if we try to push too hard, then it may become a problem. And the important thing is not to panic. Knowledge is power, so it's important for you to get the knowledge that you need so that you can understand what's going on. And then, of course, your approach has to be diplomatic so that you don't cause any problems in the relationship. However, there comes a point where if things are so much out of control that the person now becomes a danger to themselves or others, then we do have stipulations in the law that allows for persons to be treated against their will. And so that would mean now having to get in touch with the community mental health service to get assistance. It's very important to really know who the mental health persons are, because even if it's not an extreme situation, they can always advise you, right? So don't wait. One of the problems is with procrastination. You know, we see something going on and it doesn't look so bad, you know, and then we decide to watch it. I think even if we're watching it, we should be talking to somebody and getting information, because maybe the community mental health service can be of some kind of help. I hope I've answered that one.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard. Here's a comment. It is well and good telling people to talk about mental illness. The same doctors and nurses and psychiatric aid discriminate. So also who work in the field have to do some introspection. Are there any more questions or comments? I see that hand.
about hyperactive. That's how we call it, hyperactive. But at the same time, what I have gathered from you is that sometimes it's not really hyperactive, the child is hyperactive. But as a teacher, you've been observing the child and you say to the parents, seek professional help. And then they will go and say, you say the children are mad, and they refuse to do so. And after years and years and years, when they want to do so, the child has grown and passed that stage of getting the
Good point. Thanks for that comment.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My question is about complex PTSD. If we look in the DSM, for example, there's a list of symptoms for PTSD. So when you talk about complex PTSD, I just want some more information as to what additional will be there or how it is actually made of.
Complex PTSD is a new area of study, so there isn't a whole lot of information. Basically, what some clinicians are saying is that there are a set of symptoms that they're seeing which seem to emulate if the person has actually gone through an experience of neglect, of being sexually abused when they were children from the early stages, and that they actually take the experience of the trauma, and that makes them a lot more vulnerable. If they then encounter a situation of trauma, it then actually adds another layer of trauma. So then they discuss that as actually being complex PTSD. But as I had stated there, this is not found in the DSM. All right? So you're not going to find everything in the DSM, by the way. For those of you who are studying, and the Jamaican context will teach, the psychiatrist will tell you, not everything is yet documented in the DSM. All right? Because there is still a need for further research and study, but clinicians might see patterns, they might see symptomatology, and they might see the development of a syndrome. But it takes time for that to eventually become something that will be entered into the DSM. And by the way, please remember that in Jamaica, we don't just use the DSM. There is the ICD-10, right, which you must familiarize yourself with. So it is not sufficient that you only know the DSM file.
There's last question. I see that hand.
Okay. It is true that medication carries with it certain risks, but in medicine we have this thing where we measure risks versus benefit. I'm going to answer your question in a minute, but just to say that we also have to weigh the risk of the child dropping out of school, becoming delinquent, if they are not properly managed. So there's a lot of resistance to medication that we have to overcome, but sometimes that resistance is not based on knowledge. Okay, so we have to look at the risk versus the benefit. Yes, there are other strategies for dealing with ADHD. There are some play therapy techniques that have been used. These techniques are usually geared towards helping the child, putting the child in situations where they have to control themselves in a play. So certain games that require restraint are used in play therapy. to manage ADHD. I think that there are some computer software also. I've heard about it, I've not seen it, but that there's some computer software that can be used to help to manage the ADHD as well. And of course, there are other things that have been touted. For example, the vitamin Bs, the B complexes, and the omega vitamins have been touted as being helpful. Of course, these are brain vitamins. The brain needs a lot of B vitamins for metabolism, and the omega vitamins help in terms of the repair of the brain. And so these have been touted, and some people have reported improvement using these things. In Jamaica, some of us have actually tried the use of coffee, strong black coffee. Well, not necessarily black, because some children won't drink black coffee. But the medications are very expensive and not always available. And so we may suggest coffee as something that can be used.
Okay, let me just add something to what Dr. Bernard said. In ADHD, the problem is one of organization. So the child finds difficulty in organizing their time and also in organizing their surroundings. So we recommend a lot of aids in terms of time. So you may put up something on your wall, like some sticker. When I get up, I wash my face, I brush my teeth, I eat my breakfast, so that the child learns a routine. And we try to put structure. So you structure the time by putting up lists. If I'm doing a test tomorrow, or if I'm going on a field trip, this is what I need to put in my bag. 1, 2, 3, and you have lists all over the place. You also try to structure the environment. Because we know the ADHD kids, the books are on the floor, under the desk, all kind of things, right? So you have just put more structure. This is for pencils, this is for pen, this is for book, this is for this type of book. So those are the kind of environmental stuff that we try to teach the parents can go and read about it, and that will help in giving some structure and organization to their life.
Three quick questions, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. That's Dr. Allen, a noted psychiatrist who has tutored a lot of us. So the first question was, if a young person is having mental health challenges and needs help, where do they go for help? Well, I'm telling you, a lot of young people will talk to their own friends, right? So that's why we need to educate everybody. Then I would say parents, a trusted adult. Then you're talking about teachers, guidance counselors. Mr. Chen did mention the thing about confidentiality. The next realm would be NGOs or maybe community-based organizations or faith-based organizations in your community that may offer some counseling services. The next tier would be your health services. We're really trying to get our health providers more in tune in mental health so that at least they can recognize and refer. And of course, the next year will be your mental health services, which is in most of our health centers, 100 and odd of our health centers, right? And so the mental health services would then refer to the child guidance services. So that's how I see the kind of organogram. What was the other question? Sorry.
Just to add to that, you spoke about millennia and the use of social media. Well, young people can feel free to go on Facebook and Instagram and search for Jamaica Mental Health Advocacy Network. Our director is here, and you can just follow us and send us a DM or a Facebook message. What? Yes, a DM, a distant message. Yes, and right, young people know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's, yes, but it's, so we have that available for young people. So whatever you're going through, you can just click follow and then speak with somebody. It's Jamaica Mental Health Advocacy Network, JAMHAN, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter as well. Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of the crisis, we know that we have an adult service for crises. Dr. Shetty, who is a child psychiatrist who unfortunately could not have been here, he has been talking about an adult service for crisis for children, but we haven't reached there yet. What I would suggest is one, you could call your adult mental health team, or if you can get the person to the hospital. A lot of our hospitals have been sensitized to how to care for an aggressive, out-of-control patient, whether an adolescent or an adult, and then they will then call the mental health services to try to stabilize that person until we can get more help. With regards to a number, our minister gave a press release. We're trying to formulate a toll-free number. We're not going to give it out yet because it's at the end of the month. And we're collaborating with Choose Life International. Dr. Donovan Thomas is here. He'll be presenting later. So that, it will be a number for mental health assistance and also suicide prevention. So hopefully by the end of the month, we'll be able to announce one number that you can call, and then the person will then triage and decide who's the most appropriate person to deal with that crisis.
And somebody asked me, what about those persons who are deaf? How can they contact us? And we're open to have a text line where they can actually text, and even WhatsApp as well. We hope to build that into the system. Okay. I see one last burning question, and then we have to go on.
Good afternoon. My name is Stacey Ann Johnson, nursing student from the Northern Caribbean University Nursing School. Okay, my question is, you have a family member with mental issues, and you're not able to cope, or the family or the household is not, members are not able to cope or to deal with such family member. Do you have facilities that can accommodate such family member for any period of time, or do you have facilities for such? Not necessarily a teenager, maybe, or in both adults and or teenagers. Because I've known of an age group between the age of 13 to 18, and there was major issues with that.
Okay, so the way we respond to depend on the level of the intensity and the acuteness of the person's condition. So if the person is acutely ill, then of course the person may need to be admitted to the hospital. But subsequent to the hospital, sometimes we know persons can't be returned directly back to the home. So we are trying to build up transitional homes. And we do have homes here, not as much as we want to, that the person can actually go to and continue rehabilitation until they are ready to actually transition back home. So there are facilities there, not enough for children. We have more so for the adults, not so much for children. Well, in Manchester, there's Ebenezer Home. But it's only for men. But it's more for the homeless, right? Yeah. Yes, yes. More, like I have the answer. Manchester.
Yes, for Manchester, well, I think by now everybody knows about the Ebenezer Home. Ebenezer Home, the name has changed to Ebenezer Rehabilitation Center or something like that. Yes. So what it is, it's a place, it's a residential facility where persons who are homeless can go and they will be supervised, given the care they need, and get into rehabilitation activities with the view to returning them or reuniting them with their families. And we are happy to know that a couple of them have been reunited with families. Unfortunately, we have had some longer stay persons whose families have not yet got to the place where they fully embrace their loved ones. So they have been in the home, some of them from inception. So that home is really for a specific group of persons, men, and in fact, they only can take men now, so homeless men with mental problems. Apart from that, we have been doing a kind of partnership with some private homes. So in Manchester, and in Clarendon too, in Manchester primarily, there are a few private homes that offer some nursing care, and we have partnered with some of them to accept persons who would have been admitted to hospital and who would have needed some additional supervision with their care. These are not necessarily mental health facilities, but there are interested persons, the operators of these homes. Some of them have gone to be trained as psychiatric nursing aides, and so they're able to offer the supervision that is necessary for some of these persons. And so we refer the relatives to these persons, and they make their own arrangements. So it is not that government is doing that, all right? And you could get the contacts subsequently. Okay.
Okay, at this juncture, we're going to have some presentations. Okay. We're going to show the video that was not able to be shown earlier, the UNICEF video, which I hear is a classic.
is a youth-led, youth-organized, and youth-driven tool designed to empower Jamaican youth. Sign up to become a U-Reporter today. It is really, really easy. Send the word JOIN to the U-Report Jamaica Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at U-Report Jamaica. It is that easy. U-Reporters all over the world are ushering change. Join the movement today. Speak out on your issues and be positive agents of change. I dare you. Your voice matters. Your voice matters.
Your voice matters.
Your voice matters.
Youth, your voice matters. Talk of youth, your voice matters.
So when you wait for join the movement of 4.8 million.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dana, Makita, and Brittany, on behalf of the Ministry of Health and Southern Regional Health Authority, we really want to thank you for coming today and sharing your personal experiences with mental health and social media. The youth here were definitely impacted by what you shared. I was impacted, and it was really a privilege having you here. So thank you for coming, and please accept this token of our appreciation, and we hope to see you again in the future.
Ms. Whitter? Ms. Whitter is our social worker in St. Elizabeth. Dr. Bernard has left. Okay. Yes. Who's going to pick?
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Andre Davis, on behalf of the Ministry of Health and by extension the Southern Regional Health Authority's Mental Health Unit, we'd like to present to you with this token as our appreciation for your presentation and the part that you have played in our Mental Health Day conference. What you have presented was well received, as was demonstrated by the feedback and the questions that we got from the audience. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors as you continue to impact lives through this medium and others.
Thank you.